that the Council of the Township of North Huron accept the amended agenda for the May 6, 2019 council meeting as amended to include 8.4 correspondence. Do I have a mover? Anita, and a seconder? Rick, all in favor? Passes. Disclosure of pecuniary interests. Mr. Sykes.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. I just wanted to make mention to council that I will be declaring conflict of interest for item 5.2.1 in the bills of accounts. It's check number 503820. That check is made out to my wife, Tiffany Syke. She is, obviously she's my spouse, and she works for the daycare as an EC, and I will not participate in the discussion or vote on that particular payment. Also on 7.3.1 of the regular council meeting, there's a letter in there as it relates to the Wingham Hitman Fastball Club requesting something from council. I'm an active member of that fastball club, and therefore I will not be participating in the discussion or voting on that request as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none. Public comments. This is an opportunity for the members of the public to speak to any item of business that is on the agenda. There is a 2-minute per person time lapse. Would anybody in the audience like to speak to anything that's on the agenda tonight? Seeing no one, we shall move on. Consent agenda. 5.1. I'm just going to start from 5.1 to 1 to 5.14. Is there anything there anybody would like to pull out and talk to? Seeing none. 5.2 reports, the bills and accounts. Anything there anyone would like to speak to? Seeing none. And then 5.3 correspondence, 5.3.1 to 5.3.5. Is there anything in there? Yes, Chris, go ahead.
This would be the HAD from Cheryl Gallant. Just wondering, Dwayne, does that affect us at all? This is what regarding the government changing some Fisheries Act, and it would cost people, residents more money, farmers more money if things had to be altered on their lands. That's what I got from it. It's a little obscure, not a ton of detail, but it does alert your attention.
Yeah, it's a private member's bill. So there is the potential.
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, or.
If you don't mind me, I would recommend, because I picked up on that too, I'd recommend that if council wishes, we should send a letter in support. Just to me, again, it looks like there's a lot of adding in some more regulations, and as you said, this could go right down to farm drainage and just another bureaucracy that we don't need to hold us up. So I would be in favor if somebody wanted to put a motion forward to send a letter in support of the private member's bill. Is that what you're looking for?
I would do that, yes.
Chris is moving. Do I have a seconder? Paul is seconding. All in favor? Carries.
Thank you.
I have another question, 5.3.3, the municipal policing billing. Why is the difference in household and commercial and industry different between the township and North Huron and the OPP police portion?
I'm
not sure what it means.
Can you pick up on that? That's the difference because of.
So that the difference would there be because of the difference between the billing models. So in 2020, we are still under the contract in the township of North Huron, which is Wingham Ward, and the OPP police portion would be just Blythe and East Monash, is my understanding. However, I can't confirm or deny that.
Because the numbers are then, that's what I was thinking too, but the numbers are really low then for Blythe and so on. It's like 862 households. I didn't understand what it means.
So-
Again, I'm gonna interject in there and wonder if we can get clarification for that from the OPP at your, police board.
So so my understanding would be that this could be a request that Mark Bedard is the one who obviously signs off on this thing. It's the letter came from him. A request from the CAO could easily answer that question. The police services board isn't going to have any involvement with Mark, so it would be a council direction from to request staff to get a clarification on that request.
I think we'll need a motion for that. Would you make that a motion, Troy?
I would make a motion.
Can I get a seconder? Nina? All in favor? Carries. Okay, and if that's everything, that the Council Township of North Huron hereby adopt consent items 5.1 to 5.13, and further, the Council Township of North Huron hereby receive consent items 5.1.3 to 5.3.54. Information. Do I have a mover? We have Kevin, seconder, Paul, all in favor, carries. Next, we have the public delegations. We have, I just lost my Sergeant Kenneth Key from the Municipal Police Bureau Specialist OPP RE information regarding different police service arrangements between North Huron and the wards. Well, you might have timed that pretty good.
Good evening. Okay, so good evening. I don't have a PowerPoint, so just bear with me. I think there's some items I included that should be in your agenda. So I do have some notes I'm going to follow, and I'll cover off just briefly. I'll try to cover off some points and hopefully answer some of the questions that might have come up tonight. And feel free, if there's any questions as well, feel free to ask. And if I don't know the answers, I will do my best to find them for you. So good evening, Reed Bailey, members of council, Mr. Dwayne Evans and municipal staff and residents of North Huron. My name is Kenneth Key, and I'm a sergeant with the Municipal Policing Bureau out of headquarters in Aurelia. With me tonight actually is my colleague, Sergeant Pete Marshall, and as well as Acting Inspector Wendy Burrow from the Huron County Detachment. So a little introduction about myself. I'm in my 23rd year of policing, having worked primarily in patrol as well as criminal investigations. And I currently work out of the headquarters in Aurelia. Our bureau is primarily responsible for managing municipal policing agreements with various stakeholders. And upon requests made by municipalities to the Ministry of the Solicitor General, we develop OPP municipal police contract proposals. We also oversee the transition process in those circumstances where municipal police services disband and the OPP assumes responsibility for providing those police services as what occurred here. Now, while I was not originally involved in the original and subsequent costing proposals made to the North Huron municipality regarding municipal policing services for the Wingham Ward, I was involved in coordinating the transition process from the Wingham Police Service to the OPP. So to provide you with a bit of an outline of what I'm going to address this evening, I'll speak briefly to the differences between a Section 10 contract and a Section 5.1 non-contract policing arrangement with the OPP. I'll talk a bit about the Wingham Ward transition contract. Also speak to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission decision summary, which is included in your agenda. I'll talk about the municipality and the responsibilities for providing adequate and effective policing services, and then also speak to the Huron County OPP police service delivery from the Wingham Satellite Office. So firstly, I want to talk about the comparison between contract and non-contract locations within the OPP. And firstly, I'll draw your attention to page 92 of the agenda. This chart provides the main differences between OPP police municipalities under either a Section 10 contract or a Section 5.1 non-contract arrangement. The situation within the township of North Huron is somewhat unique, whereby the township has differing OPP policing arrangements amongst the wards. So in this case, the Wingham Ward is currently under a Section 10 contract that is considered to be a transition contract. As indicated, starting at the bottom of page 87, I believe in the agenda, or page 3 of the actual document, and continuing on to page 88, this transition contract is for a defined number of contractual hours of service as represented by uniform and civilian full-time equivalents, or FTEs. For the wards of East Wawanosh and Blythe, OPP policing services are administered under a Section 5.1 non-contract policing arrangement. So I want to focus on the main difference between a Section 10 and Section 5.1, that is being the civilian governance model. And as you can see by the comparison chart there, under a Section 10 contract, a police service board is required. In a non-contract location, there are no provisions for a police services board, and rather a CPAC can be formed under the municipality's discretion. So drawing your attention now to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission decision summary. And I'll speak a bit about the responsibilities of municipalities under the Police Services Act. So on page 85 to page 91 of your agenda package provides a copy of this decision summary. And this is regarding the Wingham Police Service disbandment and authorization to allow North Huron to enter into a contract with the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services. And actually, I should point out now that I believe it's referred to as the Ministry of the Solicitor General for the provision of policing services by the OPP. So as mentioned in the summary, the principal concern of the Commission is to determine that the policing service arrangement that is being made will provide adequate, and effective police services to the residents, and in this case, the Wingham Ward of North Huron. The background section primarily provides details related to the history of events and decisions that led to the Commission's decision. Page 87 of the agenda, which is also, I believe, page 3 of the document, sets out the roles and responsibilities of municipalities and police services boards. Referencing Section 4 of the Police Services Act, municipalities are to provide adequate and effective policing services, which include the 5 points specifically listed on that page. The Police Services Act indicates that municipalities shall be responsible for providing all the infrastructure and administration necessary for providing policing services, including vehicles and equipment. So I believe there's a question raised about why is it that the municipality has to fund for, say, for example, when the officers from Wingham came over, why was there money from the municipality within the contract that had to be provided to purchase equipment? And as I say, it's mainly to do with the legislation. The municipalities are the ones that are responsible to fund those services and those equipments and the uniform as well for those officers that are being added into the OPP. So that's under legislation. So I'll talk about the police service delivery within the Wingham Ward. So although not indicated in the decision summary, the contract proposal agreed upon indicates that the Huron County Detachment Commander would be responsible to oversee all aspects of service delivery. The transition contract indicates the uniform and civilian full-time equivalent resources. The proposal indicates that the Huron County OPP detachment will be the administration and operations center. The resources identified will be deployed to the Wingham Ward of the township primarily from this location. And the current location of the Admin Operations Center is based in Goderich. However, this will obviously change when the new building is brought forward, I believe, and in Clinton, which I believe the target date for completion is April of 2020. I can't speak specifically as to the details of the Wingham satellite office right now. I think the expectation is that it will be closing. But in terms of details, in terms of timelines and use of that facility after, we are in consultation with our facilities, and there is hopefully information forthcoming, but I can't give you specific details with relation to that at this time. So in relation to service delivery, the satellite office on Bristol Terrace is currently utilized as a reporting location for the Huron County OPP detachment members to work out of. While the facilities have sufficient space to accommodate the additional members, it currently is not designed to provide public access. If members of the public wish to attend the Bristol Terrace location for policing services, they can certainly do so. And upon attendance, people can access the telephone booth at the front of the building in order to request policing services. This phone will provide direct contact with our communications center in London, who will arrange to dispatch an officer. So with regards to the Wingham satellite location, as I explained, in the future, if we have any further details in terms of what will occur in terms of possible use of that facility after, again, I can hopefully get that information to you sooner rather than later. But that basically covers off all the information that I can provide for you right now. But again, if there's any questions or concerns, I'm happy to entertain those at this point in time.
I'm gonna open it up to council. Is there any questions? Go ahead, Chris.
Just through you, Reeve. Yeah, I guess I was one of the complainers about the cost of the transition and about the equipment. And I'd have to go hunting, but I'm sure I read that the Crown is supposed to cover the costs of equipment and what have you.
Right. The OPP definitely is the supplier of those types of items. But again, if you read the legislation, it is the municipality that is ultimately responsible to,
Further
in essence,
deeper.
fund those. Yeah. And that's standard across in any of our transitions.
So if I understand that properly, it's just a one-time shot we have to pay out because they're integrating into your system and then our costing is covered.
That's correct.
Okay. Good, Trev.
I think another comment or question that has been come up when comparing a section 10 to a section 5.1 is why is the cost associated to delivering a police service in Wingham Ward specifically much greater than the policing costs associated to delivering a service in Blythe, East Wawash? What I'm hearing or what I've read is we've got those officers specifically for a number of hours within the municipality. They're guaranteed to be within the ward of Wingham for X amount of hours. In a 5.1, we do not have that. They could be in the south part of Huron County. They could be here for all it matters. And then that's the comment that I see as why the difference in cost versus a section 10 to a 5.1. Can you just comment to that?
Yeah. So, and as what you're saying is essentially correct. But the Wingham Ward right now is the transition contract is an FTE based contract. It's for a set amount of positions with a set amount of hours. And that is required to be implemented again for those 3+ years in order for us to get the data to roll into what is typically used for the cost recovery, which is the OPP billing model, which has nothing to do with FTEs, was what it comes down to. It comes down to an integrated service delivery where you have officers that are assigned to zones. But again, there's no X amount of hours and X amount of officers in a specific, area as opposed to the Wingham Ward, which does have that situation. So
if I could do a bit of a follow-up on that too, then. So right now, the cost of policing in Wingham is no cheaper at this point. We're fulfilling a 3-year contract. At the end of 3 years, you're going to have the stats there to determine how much policing it would take to keep us things proper in the Wingham Ward, which means we're going to drop down to a 5.1, and the OP would say we need to put X amount of extra hours in there based on the activity in the Wingham Ward, and that's how you're going to come up with your funding?
I don't quite know if I understand your question. So, sorry, yeah, Pete, would you mind?
Yeah, no. So, the end of your contract. So, you have the choice, the opportunity to either renew your contract, or you can revert to a section 5.1. That choice is up to the municipality whether you want to maintain that contract or not, right? Ken's already explained the benefits or the differences between having a 5.1 or having a section 10, where you got your PSB, your civilian oversight, or under 5.1 you don't. You can have your CPAC, but that's just a group of people getting together so that the local league has to can interact with representatives from the community. Upon the completion of your 3+ years, the reason that we need that as Ken was saying, was to build that database up. We require that database for our billing model. The billing model requires, it's all based on a 4-year rolling average. So your calls for service for 2019, your billing for the upcoming 2020 starts at 2015, I believe, 2015 up and through to 2019. So it's all those averages of calls for service to the base through the course of that roll into an average, which we provide to you folks as your billing estimate, right, which you'll receive in the fall. So here's your 2020 estimate for your calls for service. So that goes back to your question there in regards to funding and this sort of thing. It's got nothing to do with funding. It's just got to do with building that database up so that we can roll you into that billing model. And that is where, as what Mr. Evans was showing during the proposal last year, was that's where you start seeing your savings, right? Because currently right now it's an FTE based. You're paying for a specific set of hours, like Ken was saying. And then once that 3+ years is over, and whether you revert back to a 5.1 or whether you maintain your section 10, you're still going to be rolled into the billing model. And much like every other municipality across the province, you'll be part of that billing model. Whether you're a section 10 or section 5.1, that doesn't change the way that we bill. Every municipality across the province is billed just the exact same. That's the billing model. You call it service and your base model. The differences between your section 10 and your 5.1, again, there's no difference in what you're paying for the service. It's just to do with how you want that service delivered. Do you want that civilian oversight? Do you not want that civilian oversight? So I don't know if that's answered your question, but it's not based on funding of what we get into the 3+ years. It's all to do with the data required to roll your municipality into the billing model. So right now, North Huron itself, outside of Wingham Ward, is under the billing model. Wingham Ward is not, because of the information we require to build up that database for this part of the township.
So just going back, I won't carry on too long, but so if I have the 5.1 or the 10.2 in 3 years, we decide to go to 5, we could take 5.1 and 5.10 are the same price.
Yeah.
It's a section 10.
Sorry,
or
section
5.1.
Section 10, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's essentially no difference. With the section 10, there's the difference of the civilian governance, and the section 10 you have the ability to apply for grants, such as say extra grants to say do some extra ride programs. So there's a few, I don't think perks is the right term, but there's a few more options for you under that section 10. But the section 5.1 might not give you that opportunity, but in essence they're the same thing. The costs are the same. Section 10s, some municipalities under section 10s do have an opportunity, if they want enhancements to address a specific situation, such as if they feel there's a need for traffic enforcement. So they want to have a dedicated position that only deals with traffic enforcement. Somebody in the schools, if they want somebody that does Monday to Friday school resource officer, that is over and above. It's not to boost the front line, it's to address a specific need that the municipality sees fit. That would be an extra, that would come at an extra cost, right? That the municipality would have to fund. But set aside from that, there's no cost difference.
Thank you very much. Any other questions go ahead, Kevin.
Through you. In the current transition setup, how many hours are allocated, of officer hours are allocated for the wing?
In total, I know there, and I do have the contract with me. I'd have to go through. Essentially what it comes down to is each officer or each officer uniform position is to provide 1,417 hours per year. It's per year, right? 1,417 hours per year. Now, there is a method to coming up with that number. I can't give you all the specifics as to how. I could certainly provide that with you if you're interested to know how we come up with that number. I could provide that information to you later on. But in essence, what you're doing, and I believe under the contract, it is 7. Yes. So you times that by 1417 for all the uniforms. So that's what you're getting per year for each officer. 1417 is the number. 1417 hours, 1,417 hours per officer per year.
Is that trackable?
We do track that, and what happens is there's our method for tracking is called a daily activity reporting system. Each officer at the end of their shift has to enter in essence, what they did from start to finish on their shift. Those hours are tracked and then reconciled through the contract to make sure those hours are being fulfilled.
I guess it's just in layman terms of, how often there's a car in town.
Well, and I can't give you specifics. I mean, the goal of the transition contract is the town has to receive that service. Now, if that service is not being provided, there is a reconciliation. Now, obviously, our goal is not to do that. Our goal is to, what's written in the contract for the hours that need to be provided, we are to provide that. And so, from that, we're hoping that the officers that are working here, we have a way of tracking, making sure there's specific numbers that basically denote zones. So Wingham is a specific zone, and so we ensure, and that's been explained to the officers, that when they're tracking their work, they're assigning it to the Wingham zone, so we can be accurate and know that they are actually providing the service and are here doing their work in this community.
That's just a floating time during the day. There's no specific time frame that from this hour to this hour there's a car in town. This hour to there isn't. It's.
I can't answer that question. I mean, I don't know the operational side in terms of how, but the assumption is the hours are being provided. That's what's required, and so the officers that are here are working in this zone are providing the hours, and the goal of the contract is to have those hours guaranteed for officers to provide that number, 1,417 hours per year.
Kevin? One of the things that council hasn't been, and the police services board is getting more information as we see during monthly reporting, is we're going to be seeing more information is going to be starting to flow more readily from the police services board up to council as it relates to calls for service. What is the services? What kind of calls are we doing? What kind of type of incidents are we having? One of the biggest concerns throughout this entire process that we talked about in the Blythe and East Wallinosh ward was people didn't want to necessarily see a car or have a cop if they didn't need it. If they didn't need the service, was it just because to drive around just to be looked and seen? The question is that the type of service you want, or do you want to have service when you really need it? When you call the OPP or the Wingham Police when you had it, you wanted to make sure you had them when they were there. So I think the conversation from a council perspective is council needs to get more in tune with what kind of calls we're getting in the Wingham ward, what kind of calls and what kind of things we see, compared to what we have had in the past. I will tell you from our police services board and the public commentary that the OPP have been giving to us as police service board members is everything's been positive. There has been not a lot of negativity at all as it relates to the transition. And I would tell you that there's been lots of service where the police services board is saying we've had in 1 month more ride checks in the town of Wingham than we had in a 3-year period, only because that was the availability of the officers at the time. Wingham Police Service didn't have those officers availability because of the other calls that they had and what the structure of the employment was. So, I think from a standpoint of knowing how many hours we need, but understanding what those calls or service are and what the operational model is, council's going to start to get more volume of information to betterly get a handle on, are we seeing positive trends in our calls for service, or what type of service do we really want in the Wingham ward? Because really, at the end of the day, that's what we're hoping for. The residents wanted to make sure they had a policing service in the municipality. They were concerned about the conversation about quote-unquote drive-by service. I would argue that they're not getting drive-by service, and that's the question that we want to make sure we maintain. But again, at the end of the day, if the Wingham Ward in the Township of North Huron wants to have a car in the municipality 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they're going to have to pay for it. And if we don't need it, why are we having it? That's the question I think that all of us need to take a step back and say, if there's somebody that really needs that police car outside of Wingham because there's another incident of a more serious factor, it should go there. We can deal with an issue that is maybe not as a serious nature in Wingham another way. We have to deal with those types of things, but it's information, I think, is what council really hasn't had in the past. Police Services Board has really dealt with it. But because now the model is Police Services Board, but oversight through the municipality and the council members have to be more informed about what those levels of service are. I think you're going to see that going forward.
Yeah, and just to that point, I mean, the Police Services Board reports, you will be able to get the information in terms of what the officers are doing, how many patrol hours, and calls for service, and that type of data, which might be able to assist you in clarifying, okay, their officers are here and they're working, they're patrolling, they're taking the calls for service, and that maybe would provide some good information for you. I don't know if that's regularly disseminated to council or whether that's just left with the Police Services Board or.
Well, like I said, Kent, one of the things that we as Police Services Board, we're learning this process too. So, as counselors, what type of information that counselor wants to see, Police Services Board can ask the detachment commander to provide that level of service, that level of information to disseminate, to come back to council with that information. But we don't know what council wants. We only know what we need is we review based on the contract and what the level of service is. We're really, it's an oversight committee, really. It's looking for problems or issues that we have to deal with and then deal with it through that. But if council wants more information, feel free to, as the chair, pass them on to myself or Rick, and we will get the detachment commander to provide that information in our monthly report that's going to start coming up to council monthly.
Thanks, Joe. Any more questions or comments for Mr. Key? Mr. Key, thank you very much for making the trip here. We do appreciate it. A few questions, but very important.
Yeah, and anytime there's further questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And staying with the police theme, we're going to have Sergeant Laura Brown, Western Region OPP Headquarters, and Selena Hislett, Executive Director, Rural Response for Healthy Children, RE Safety Places Certificate.
Good evening, Rick Bailey and Council. I'm Selena, this is Sergeant Brown. In March, Sheldon Kennedy visited Huron County to launch Safe Places Youth Certification. Sheldon is a child advocate, an Order of Canada recipient, and also a victim of sexual abuse. When Sheldon disclosed the abuse in the early 90s, it turned the NHL world on its head. You may remember that Sheldon was playing for the Calgary Flames at the time. So much has changed since that time, but we do know that, that the impacts of abuse, harassment, and bullying continue, that occur when we're children and youth, are causing some monumental social and financial impacts in our country, in our county, and all across the world. So these are some headlines that actually Sheldon had gathered for his presentation. And you have all seen the presentation in your package, I'm assuming? Yeah. Okay. So victims of child abuse are 26 more times likely to experience homelessness. Victims of child abuse have a 90% worse health than the general population. 70 to 80% of survivors report excessive drug and alcohol use. Children who experience abuse are almost 60% more likely to be arrested as juveniles. Almost 80% of Canadian adults report some form of trauma exposure in their lifetime. And people who have experienced trauma are 15 times more likely to attempt suicide. In our work at Rural Response for Healthy Children, we work on the premise that we're all walking with trauma. There's research related to adverse childhood experiences that rates our trauma and counts us up to 10. So if we came from a family where there was an alcoholic or a divorce or a death in the family, all these equal up to things that would give individuals a count up to 10. And as that number goes up, all these risks increase. So whether it's abuse, bullying, harassment, discrimination, or things happening in the home or within family or community, they all contribute to later implications on the cost of healthcare overall. So to bring this a bit closer to home, these numbers were gathered by the Domestic Assault Review Team just recently from the members that sit around that table. So we have almost 8,000 people living in poverty in Huron. Over 2,000 of them are children aged 0 to 17. Over 17,500 people are using the food bank. 31% of them are children. In the last year or so, Huron OPP have responded to 458 domestic violence incidences. And we've had 224 women and children living at the women's shelter in Goderich and the second stage housing located throughout the county. 68 of them are children. These are all examples of trauma. 523 calls have been received to a crisis intervention line. 440 individuals were admitted to the hospital for mental health services. So that's the Goderich Hospital with psychiatric services. And there are over 1,000 people in the county living at outpatient that are living in their home or in other places receiving psychiatric services. So, as Sheldon says, when we know better, we can do better. And that's kind of where we're at today. We know better. Statistics and research has informed us on how we can do better. And you as municipalities have the opportunity to model doing better. The municipalities are required to provide a community safety and well-being plan to the Ministry of Solicitor General. I just learned to change in the last week or so. And so Rural Response is working with our OPP colleagues, our municipal colleagues, our other partner agencies to recognize that there's a necessity to include health promotion strategies related to well-being of children and youth as an action item in those plans that you have to develop and submit, I think, by March of 2020. So we are visiting local municipalities now to ask that you create, so this is a tool that you can create to achieve this in your plan, is to create a human resource policy that requires any municipal employee or volunteer that works with children and youth to be Safe Places Youth Certified. Safe Places Youth Certified is recognized by the OPP across the province as a community safety plan or tool. And it supports quality activities. So any of the extracurricular activities where children and youth are involved, or vacation Bible schools, or wherever kids are, to reduce potential risks. It demonstrates to the community and allows you to model that you highly value the responsibility of a person in a position of trust with children and youth. And it demonstrates to them that as activity leaders, so as that coach, as that summer camp leader, that they have the training and knowledge to contribute to the trust. And here's why that's important, is to be having more trusted adults in our community means that when children and youth come forward about bullying, abuse, harassment, or discrimination that they experience, the more that those trusted adults are going to listen and respond to those kids. Research tells us that the sooner we respond to children and youth and get them coordinated with services and on a path of healing, the lower those risks become later in life. So it lowers healthcare costs. It lowers needs on addictions and mental health services. So we've visited the County of Huron. Bailey will be familiar probably with parts of this presentation, and that the county has directed staff to create a policy for their human resources that all staff and volunteers working with kids need to have Safe Places Use certification. We've just wrapped up getting 40 librarians certified, and the town of Goderich is in the midst of having about 35 of their staff certified. So we're visiting the municipalities, asking for you to consider the same and making those connections between the opportunity you have with that community safety and well-being plan.
I feel like you said all the good stuff. Well, good evening, everyone. I have the pleasure of joining Selena to speak with you this evening because this is a very exciting opportunity and project for us to collaborate on. And the work that Selena has been doing and her partners have been doing in Huron is something that I've been taking in my role to other communities. So my catchment area has, within the last 7 months, grown from 1 county to 15. So it's a great opportunity to see what works and what needs work throughout the region. And it's very exciting because things like this are very simple ideas to take to other communities. When you find something that works, you share it, and vice versa. So Selena did touch on the community safety and well-being plans, and many people in this room are likely familiar with that and what those responsibilities entail. And as that continues to unfold, it's an exciting time to put the determination of community priorities back into the hands of the municipality for people in the community to determine what are your priorities and how can organizations, including this one, help you meet those needs. And community leaders and municipalities should be determining where those priorities are and collectively then saying, what are we going to do both reactively and proactively? How can we address it right now? And then what do we need to do to make sure that these kinds of issues don't happen again? What that does essentially is it sends that collective message of, using Safe Places as an example, we are watching, not just we are watching when things are amiss in our communities. And as a community member and a parent myself, I want to live in a community like that, as does everybody else. So this is an excellent opportunity to not only model that kind of desire and behavior, but also to instill that opportunity for everybody in your community over the age of 18. If this is a direction that you choose to go, or any community chooses to go, then how do we make that opportunity available for anybody, any business owner, any person in the community that also wants to receive this information, this education, so that it's just one more pair, as Selena was mentioning, of eyes and ears. So it is an exciting opportunity, and especially for us as police, because I think that everybody in this room knows that our traditional response model is changing. And how we dealt with calls for service even 15, 20 years ago is very different than how we're dealing with it today. And one of the most important things that we've learned is the collaboration and partnership with not only our community partners, but our community members in general is how we're going to truly address things. Because handcuffs only work in certain situations. And I think everybody knows that. But when it comes to issues like this that run so much deeper and have such a lasting and trickle effect, now is the time to get ahead of those issues as opposed to chasing behind. It's far more cost effective, but it also makes better moral sense to say, what are our issues and what can we do about it now? So that young people, which I think we can all agree is an investment that we all make and would readily and voluntarily make, is how can we do that now so that down the road, those are the kinds of productive adults and members of our community that we all want to see. Not only for our own children, but every child in our community. So this is, it's one piece of that larger puzzle that's coming in those community safety and well-being plans, but it's an excellent jumping off point. Because again, when it comes to children's safety, I think we can all agree that's a great place to start in terms of collaboration and using that as a model moving forward. But the underlying excitement is that those social issues are being given back to the people that should be looking after them, which is our entire community, and not just one specific group, if that makes sense.
Thank you very kindly, girls. Questions or comments? Go ahead.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I think it's an admirable effort and it's very good. But I would like to know, how do you select the participants for your certification? Because you just said there's 40 librarians going into, maybe one of those is a person who abuses his child or his or her child at home? How do you find something out like that?
Well, so there's two parts to the certification. The first is anyone interested in being certified has to receive their vulnerable sector check done by the OPP. And I think would acknowledge, those of us that work in, that services, is that check really is only as good as the day it's done on. We know that and admit that. But it is an important tool, and I have seen people who refuse to get it done. So I consider that a red flag. It's their choice, but that's a red flag. And as a parent, if I knew that one of the providers of, fun for my kid was saying, no, I don't want to get my sector check done, that would be a red flag to me, but I'd still have a choice. And then the second component of the certification is a 3-hour online training that's developed by Respect Group. And that's the organization that Sheldon founded in an effort to educate and bring awareness to what individuals can do in the community. So if any of you are minor hockey coaches or a parent of a minor hockey participant, the coaches take the exact same 3-hour training. The parents do a 1-hour version. So in this youth certification, you have to do the 3-hour training. And then the certification is renewable every 3 years. And that's based on what's recommended by Respect Group, because they update their curriculum every 3 years based on the evidence that they are collecting. So again, this is one tool. It's not the be all and end all. So we still, at Rural Response, we are practicing educating parents on what to ask for. And we always say, trust your gut. If your gut says no, walk away. And if you have a chance to read Sheldon's book or see the movie Swift Current, it's emotional, but it really gives you a good perspective of trusting that gut, because the groomers are really great at grooming and encompassing a family. So Sheldon's story really speaks to that. But again, it's one tool in protecting kids.
And I think if I may, just to build on that for a moment, because I think it's an excellent point that you raise. And the reality is, unfortunately, sometimes despite our best efforts, we know that there are people like that out in our communities. What something like this does, and not even this specifically, but what something like this does is get larger groups of people educated, aware, observant, right? This is the tool that we're discussing this evening, but as Selena says, it's one tool. But quite honestly, more eyes and ears in our communities help us do our job as police officers in a variety of ways, youth aside. I mean, quite frankly, anything that's of concern or fear to anyone in the community should be a call that's made to us. But the only way that we all achieve safe communities and have safe places for our young people to live and grow is by all of us being observant, reporting things that make us uncomfortable, asking those tough questions, at least taking the steps. And like you said, if somebody says, no, I don't want to do that, what are those red flags? And do enough of us tune into those? And then what do you do with that information? What this suggests is providing an opportunity for people to become educated at minimum, and then to remind us all to remain observant for very, very good reasons for our young people. Right? I mean, there is no better reason or investment than that.
Are you aware of any programs for vulnerable seniors, for people with disabilities that are going forward like this too? Like you're very sensitive on children and women. But are there programs?
And it's an excellent question. And I mean, prior to policing, I do have a background in community social work and spent many of those years working with seniors. So I have a soft spot for what you're talking about. And yes, so there are different programs, but I think again, as a community, as part of your planning, if those are groups then that you decide these are people that we should be looking out for, that we should be going the extra mile for, then maybe as a community, you determine that let's add these as priorities and let's seek out what resources are available. And if there aren't enough to our satisfaction, then what are we going to do to create some more? But there are, and I can certainly provide you with some information about that. Even by email.
Through you, Reeve, do you work at all with the education system? Like the teachers see it all. They know where the issue, they know the children with the problems, and it's not the children's fault. It's they're hurting, and then they react, and then there's problems in the classroom. But you know, they have all the information. I don't know what all they can say.
They have, so like any of us, we are legislated by a duty to report. Us, all of you, we have a responsibility to children and youth in our community. If we see something, we report it. And that's important because it could be one, we might think, that's nothing, but it still doesn't feel right. But for example, Children's Aid Society, it could be one piece of a puzzle that then allows it all to fill in. So teachers, of course, have the duty to report obligation. Rural Response, Huron OPP, and Huron County Health Unit work together in all our schools, elementary and secondary schools, to deliver healthy relationship programs. So from Rural Response's perspective, we generally provide the education to junior kindergarten through grade 4 students on personal safety. So being abuse, discrimination, bullying aware is basically what we go in and teach about. Safe boundaries, find a trusted adult. And we often will receive a disclosure through that from a student, and through the duty report, we will call that in. Teachers, I know there's tons of teachers that make the call as well. So we're all there as organizations, and then yes, the teachers have their duty to report. But absolutely, they are the best eyes. They're one eyes. You know, if you think of the school bus driver, right? They see a portion of a day for a child that none of the rest of us see.
They are not allowed to say a word. Bus driver. They'll get fired. I've talked to a few. It's very frustrating to them. They can't even improve a situation. You know, help a child, make them feel good about themselves. They're not allowed to do that. They're stone cold drivers is what they are, with a camera in the back. And if there's a problem, they pull over, phone the boss, they come, and things get changed. But yeah, it's not like when we were children. Those were the good old days. Well, you're not as old as me, though. Don't get me wrong there.
Old as Dwayne.
So just to follow up on what Chris just said, so you are going into the schools, you're here, we cannot mandate our staff to do that, although I'm pretty sure they all would and we would. So you're simply suggesting you have and I don't mean the word simply, you're suggesting that there's a 3-hour program that we can go on and become certified, and then the good old fashioned way I would say is the police check. Oh, just so you know, my wife is a principal in the public school system.
Mm-hmm.
So following up on what Chris was talking about, do you try to follow through on the children's parents? Do you ever set a meeting up like this with the parents of the children and have conversations with them? Because that's ground zero in my world.
You mean after a disclosure's been made by a child?
No.
What do you mean?
We're going to stick to just talking about it. I understand all of that. We're going to just stick to talking about educating people not to get that far. You're talking today about educating people how to help people in safe places. And all I'm suggesting is, yes, you would talk to the children and look for disclosure. We all understand that. And every one of us here, I'm sure in this room, wouldn't walk by.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we're all beyond that. I'm suggesting that you have talked to the children, you've talked to the counselors, but it's actually ground zero is the parents. So do you ever go that far?
Absolutely.
Great.
So last year through the Youth Justice Committee, that was OPP, Rural Response, and again, the Health Unit, they did 4 series in Wingham, Exeter, and Clinton, and Goderich related to internet safety. And I know that this coming fall, there's going to be a series about healthy relationships. So and the year before that, there was sessions about drug or substance abuse that rotated through. And those are coordinated by Youth Justice Committee, which the school boards are a member of, here in OPP, probation, rural response, health unit. So lots of interagency collaboration there to engage parents in that discussion. We received Trillium funding a couple of years ago to create a guide on how parents can talk to their kids about this. So, we always say we're we're sharing information with children and students in schools, but how do we get that message home to parents? So we have text messaging systems where you can opt in to get information. We have lots of pamphlets and information available, and we do groups out in the community that engage parents. So it's coming from all angles. So yeah, there is actually a lot of programming that occurs in the county for parents.
And then we have to have this done for our staff and our council by 2020, I believe you said.
Oh, no, I'm not saying any
I forget how
deadline or
that went.
anything. Your community safety.
Yeah, she's referring to the community safety and well-being.
Yeah.
That's coming through the municipalities.
Okay.
Yes.
And we're aware of that? Go ahead, Trevor.
So this kind of falls, we as leaders in the community need to be advocates for youth. We need to be able to give them a place that's not the specific place that they normally go. The schools and those types of things, those are common things they already know. We need to be advocates of leaders within the municipality and of other places where they can go to get support that they need or not need. It's one of those things where, how do you become a leader? Well, you become a leader when you're young. You because people respect what you have to say in the community. Well, how do you do that? You provide an opportunity for youth to share, to develop, to grow within your municipality. And if you can do that, the more youth that you have and advocate for them and provide opportunity for them to change the way and change the face of what the community can be, I think you'll find that more youth will want to maintain the same level or even greater municipality than you have already. The problem is, how do we do that? And how do we do that in a safe and effective way? Because, life is busy. Life has been busy for everybody in every day. How do we change that scope where that busyness for 5 minutes becomes youth-driven? And youth-driven is what's going to get us people on this council that have a care for the municipality that we live in. That's what we have to do. And I think that's the kind of stuff that we have to have. Youth committees, youth information sessions. Support those youth and they will support us. But we also have to support them in times when it's very tough. Being a child is not easy these days. All these things are not the same. When Councillor Palmer was a child is a whole lot different than when I was a child. And my child's are a lot different than what I lived through. So we have to change with the times. And treating things as zero tolerance or whatever the word you want to use, if you're going to use a word like zero tolerance, it better be zero tolerance. There's no games because kids play on the game. They understand that if you're going to tell me it's zero tolerance and it's not, well, then what am I doing? You're not advocating for me. You're making the rule. You're changing the rules as they go. So, those are the types of things we need to, if we're going to advocate for youth and that, we have to walk the walk and talk the talk. And this is the type of stuff that I think is the most important, that if we're going to continue to have youth in the community and support our youth, these are the types of things that, the town of Goderich is a huge supporter of Youth Foundation. Councillor Bazinet has done an extreme job in the town of Goderich to get youth involved in that municipality. 8 years ago, you wouldn't even have talked to any youth and they wouldn't have known anything about municipal council in the town of Goderich. He's an advocate for youth. And we all need to be advocates in the county for youth like that. That's my comment for that.
Thank you, Trevor. Go ahead, Chris.
Through you, Reeve. You mentioned Vocation Bible School. Like, I think, I know our church and many others in the county, they have great youth programs. And I know that any adult that is involved with any child has to get a police check. And I'm sure there's a course that they have to take as well. So is that a good example of what you're looking for?
Yeah, sure. The reason I said Vacation Bible Schools is we know that they pop up throughout the county in summertime, and they're really an affordable choice for families to provide care and activity for their kids during the day. They're really one of the least expensive opportunities for families. So that's great. And we know from talking with some people at different churches throughout the county that they often feel overwhelmed because of some of the behaviors that they are dealing with at the Vacation Bible Schools. You know, they get tons of kids, right? And they've got great volunteers, et cetera, but they still feel overwhelmed by the behaviors that they're having to manage and aren't quite sure how to navigate that sometimes. So that the piece that youth certification fits into that 3-hour training gives them some tools on how, if they see kids bullying each other or an interaction between a parent and kid, it gives them some confidence because they have more awareness on, hey, wait, my gut said this and this is how I could react. I learned this in the training. And then, oh yeah, my youth certification card, I turn it over and it tells me if I need support, I can call rural response or I can call the non-emergency number for the OPP. So that they've got some backup, because Sergeant Brown and I have had this discussion about, you know, we're wanting to engage the community and we're acknowledging that sometimes it's going to be a heavy thing that they have to engage in. And so we want to make sure that people who are trained also have that support and know where to turn to themselves for some help. And we would call it debriefing in the office, but I don't know, just to make sure that it's kind of a full circle thing.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, well, Laura and Selena, we want to thank you very much for coming out. I believe we're moving forward with this. And I'm sure the councilors are interested into it, and we'll have a conversation about that, whether we want to do it as a group over a 3-hour period. I'm not sure if that's possible, but Dwayne and I'll have that conversation, or individuals, but yes, it is very important. And Trevor pointed out, I'm pretty sure for this entire council, how we feel.
Well, thank you for the discussion and questions.
Thank you. We're just going to switch 6.3 and 6.4 around. Bruce Potter is going to talk about municipal servicing standards.
So this is a presentation I made to this council probably a little over a year ago. I think, I can't remember how long ago it was. Oh, then, wasn't it? Most of you weren't here.
You didn't make it to this council.
And I made a presentation similar to this at many, many councils. And it's really talking about standards of municipal servicing for new development, you know, what you require of developers. So I'm going to fly through this quickly. A PDF of this was sent to you. I assume you've got it and you've all studied it for hours. So this was me waiting for the police to be done.
And notice that.
Fired?
Nothing.
So standards are needed so that you can provide consistent and appropriate developments of sites. And if you remember nothing else but what I say tonight in this presentation, there's another one coming, you should have standards, and you have them, and you should apply them consistently. They say draft, because Sean and I are still working on the street lighting stuff, and couple other little things, but you have standards. And those are handed to developers if they're talking about a new subdivision. And you have standards for roads, storm sewers, grading and surface drainage, water distribution, sanitary collection, and sidewalks and surface works, and dealing with utilities and stuff. I want to talk about roads first. Throughout time, standards have always been in place based upon transportation methods of the day and the needs. And the Romans built roads, and here's one of them, that made their method of transportation efficient. And I found information that they built roads about 20 feet wide, which is about what our rural roads are, so that chariots could meet on the road. And the other thing about the Romans is they had drawings. They had, if you look on the left there, they had the capstones and road bases, and they built roads to last, and some of their roads have lasted. The fortunate thing is most of the roads were built where there's no frost, and that helps a lot in making them last. Whereas, we built corduroy roads when we were opening up this country. Many of those corduroy roads worked fabulously for years, and now we keep digging them up and replacing them with gravel from time to time. And roads have to suit a purpose. And here's an example of an elk overpass. It's nowhere near Wingham. This is somewhere north of Calgary. That was part of their transportation system. And this certainly was not in North Huron this winter, maybe some other winter. But you have to look at how they'll be maintained. And we know all about snow removal and things like that. You got to look at their relationship with other services. And this is a place where big culvert washed out. Many of you may remember that in Toronto 4 or 5 years ago. There was a massive washout after a big rainstorm. So we've got to think about all those things. I'm going to go back in time a bit. The Ontario MTO used to have standards that they imposed on municipalities for road design. And that was back in the time, there's only a couple of us in this room can remember that, when the MTO actually gave you money every year to maintain roads and a bit of money to help you build new roads and bridges and stuff. That all disappeared in the early 90s, didn't it, Donna?
Yes.
I think you and I are the only one here that know about that. But what they did was they set standards for subdivision development because they didn't want to have help pay municipalities to maintain roads that were of poor standard. That was their philosophy. So at that time, they had 3 standards: a cottage road. We don't have any of them here. And they split suburban roads and urban roads based upon lot frontage. There was nothing else. And until the subsidy disappeared, everybody in Ontario, the municipalities, had to stick to those standards. And then in the 90s, as I said, they disappeared and those grants disappeared and the municipalities were on their own. What we're finding is all municipalities continue to have those same or very similar standards when they're talking to developers about roads. So I mentioned the cottage. This is actually one in Ashfield, I guess, in ACW, that was built to that standard years ago, and it's a trail back to 6 cottages, and that is a municipal road. Suburban cross sections are paved roads with ditches and culverts. This is somewhere in Huron Township, in Huron Kinloss. And they're usually on larger lots, and they may be appropriate if you had a true estate lot subdivision here. What we have found, and a lot of the municipalities along the lakeshore have found, there were a lot of subdivisions developed in the 60s and the 70s, and the average lot frontage was 102 feet. Imagine that. And that allowed the developers to work with municipalities, build roads with a suburban cross-section, which is much cheaper. A lot of residents don't like that. You see in the bottom picture there, somebody's filled in the ditch. You're going to see a couple other pictures here that are examples. And the one in the bottom right is people have filled in the ditch, threw a roll of Big O in the ditch, planted grass, and the municipal works people don't know about it until the grass has been cut 12 times. And it creates drainage problems. So that's what that cross-section normally looks like. An urban cross-section has curb and gutter. It's wide enough for 2 driving lanes and a parking lane, and in the standard the MTO established. And there's corridors for all this stuff for the utilities. And here's some examples. Can't remember where these all are. I know the bottom one somewhere. I think Hardin, bottom left one is. And these are neat. This is what a lot of people want, and if they're moving into a new subdivision. And this is a sample of an urban cross-section, what it looks like. And you can see that that you show where all of the utilities are, and each utility is given a corridor in the road. So what are your neighbors doing? I can say all of the municipalities we work for, which is pretty much everybody in this area, is requiring a full urban cross-section in their urban settlements. And historically, here in Kinloss, ATW, and Kincardine, who have had the most persistent lakeshore development, because of their history of these 102-foot lot averages, and people wanting to fill the ditches in, you know, they have a triple driveway, and there's not much left of the lawn by the time they're done, and then they want to fill them in, and there's drainage problems. In all of those municipalities, they're requiring an urban section, cross-section, no matter how big the lots are. Nobody's building massive estate lot subdivisions to speak of. And both Colborne and Huron Township have been doing that for probably close to 30 years. I referenced some of the pre-development conclusions, pre-development municipalities. So in conclusion, in all the settlement areas that we're dealing with, urban cross-sections are required. And I think if you had a truly rural estate lot subdivision where you had these 2.5 or 5 acre lots or something like that, it would be quite appropriate to look at, and important to look at a suburban cross-section. So this is your typical urban cross-section that is in these standards and has been used and modified only slightly over the number of years. Has been given out to the A2As and the other developers that we've dealt with here. It has an 8.5 meter surface width, which is 2 driving lanes and 1 parking lane. And it shows sanitary, water, storm, and corridors for all of those other utilities. Shows a corridor for sidewalk on each side. Normally, if municipalities require sidewalk and new residential development, they would put it only on one side of the road. And here is a suburban standard that we have developed, and it hasn't been used in the time we've been working with you. I want to talk a little about storm sewers and stormwater management because they're a big part of what we do in development. Storm sewers are designed for what we call the minor storm. So we design storm sewers to collect and transmit the 5-year return storm, which means once every 5 years we expect a little bigger rainfall. So that what that means is then water will run down the road, it will pond on the road for a short period of time. And any larger events in new development are designed to be handled with an overland flow route. They might run down the road through a swale between 2 houses and get out to a creek or a river. It's very expensive to design storm sewers for bigger flows. Stormwater management is a way to look at stormwater quantity and quality. I'll get the 2 words mixed up in my presentation because I always do. Storm discharges are limited, if you're looking at stormwater quantity, to peak flows which don't exceed the pre-development flows. I'll show you a chart in a second. And for quality, stormwater is improved by some sort of settlement to allow solids and the rust spots that are falling off the reeve's car to settle out on the roads and wash into some settled area. I don't know what he drives, so I can't really say that. This is an example. He's grinning.
Rusty.
Is it rusty? Oh, okay. Maybe this is just for you then. In terms of stormwater quantity, this graph really represents time as the horizontal axis and peak flow as the vertical axis. And if you look at the solid line and you have a rain shower and a little smaller one afterwards, the flow rate you might have off a 50-acre undeveloped site might have a shape like that. You know, the flows go up and then they come down. There's a little shower, they go up again, they go down afterwards. If you don't do any kind of stormwater management to look at stormwater quantity and you put paved roads in and paved driveways and rooftops and you very much increase the impermeability, you're going to have much higher flows, hence the dotted line. You're going to have them faster. In between, you're going to have lower flows. But so stormwater management quantity control is all about keeping those peaks below the pre-development peaks. And we're engineers, we like doing things with mathematics, so we figured out how to do that. And stormwater quality is about settlement. So on the left is a very artistic looking stormwater pond that's designed to settle stuff out. On the right is what's called an oil grit separator. a particular model is a brand called the Storm Scepter. And it's designed that both are designed for the same thing. There's low enough velocities, enough settlement time that solids will settle out to the bottom. The difference is that Sean's got to clean out the one on the right much more frequently. So here's an example of a stormwater management pond, and there's a drawing on the top which is shows a smaller cell and then a bigger one. The smaller one, which is in the bottom left corner, is your quality pond. So the stormwater that comes in there is designed to stay there for a period of time so the solids can settle out and you increase the quality of the stormwater. The bigger crescent-shaped pond, which is on the bottom right, and these pictures were taken before the grass started to grow. I apologize for that. It had been seeded, I believe. Is the stormwater quantity cell. So if you get a big rain, that will fill up and it'll leak out slowly to the pre-development flow size. This is a pond we did for Strathroy in one of their industrial parks. Here's a couple other examples. And this is pictures of the same one. And this is a subdivision in Bayfield, which is right near the lake. And because there was a storm sewer that had sufficient capacity, the Conservation Authority did not require quantity control. You know, you can get the water to the lake really quickly before the other water coming in the drainage area within Bayfield can get there, then you don't have to store it. But these are two quality ponds, or two pictures of a quality pond in one subdivision of Bayfield. And here's an example. The top right is in a subdivision in Mitchell. The bottom left is an industrial park in Goderich. The Goderich one must have just rained because both cells have water in them. You can also store water underground. And here's some manufacturers' pictures of different systems for building storage under a parking lot. You'd cover those all with gravel and asphalt, of course. And here's two pictures I like because the one on the right is certainly not stormwater management, but the one on the bottom left may be. It may be that no frills parking lot was designed that in an extreme rainfall, there'd be a foot of water there and it would get away slowly and that would provide your stormwater quantity control. But Mrs. Smith wasn't thinking that when she was standing there in her sandals. So you may hear as you wander around in council circles about low impact developments or LIDs. This is about looking at smaller, more intense, perhaps more expensive stormwater management from a stormwater quantity and quality perspective. We're going to be seeing more of this, and municipalities are going to be asked to do more. This is a rain garden or a bioswale. There's a couple names for them. In this example, the front of this planter is actually a stormwater management facility. The rainwater gets in there. It creates that growth that's there, but over time it leaks away through some under drains and some sand backfill. This is not in our climate, this particular picture. This example and the cross section below is a rain garden that the water off a parking area goes through a cut in the curb into a low spot, and you can see in the bottom right there's a pipe there that's an under drain that the water leaks away or it gets away more slowly. And these are capable of providing smaller degrees of stormwater management in smaller areas, and where they do a much better job, but they're extremely expensive. Here's an example that the Credit Valley Conservation Authority did in combination with either Brampton or Mississauga. I can't remember which. I think it's Brampton. And they reconstructed from this intersection all the way to the far green arrow, and there's no storm sewers there. All that road grades just slopes across the sidewalk and across that boulevard into this trench on the left-hand side, which is their stormwater management facility. So not only do you have a rain garden there, and these plants are growing, but underneath that, there's a whole filter bed and under drain system that provides both stormwater quantity and quality. So we're going to be seeing more of that type of impetus come into even our smaller municipalities. We haven't seen a lot of it yet. We've done a couple little things in Huron County of very small nature in one or two municipalities. I want to talk about grading and drainage. And when we're doing subdivision development and reviewing drawings of other consulting engineers, drainage is of prime importance because it always comes back and is a problem later on. And this is just a sample drawing that you can see that there's a house footprint there. There are grades and arrows and flow arrows that say this is the intent of the grading plan. And in this particular example, the street on the left is probably 20 or 30 feet higher than the street on the right. All those contour lines show it's quite steep. And there's some very significant grading. And if you look at the lot on lot 74 on the right, you can see at the rear of that house, the water has to actually slope away from the house and then go around and down between the two houses. And just as council members, I think it's important for you to know that lot grading is a very critical part of what happens in any development. In the big cities, they develop 1,000 lot subdivisions. One builder builds them all. He has a crew that looks after all the lot grading. It's less likely to be a problem. Here we have a 20 lot subdivision. We have 20 different builders, 20 different owners, 20 different times to not make it work. I was going to say something different. This is another example of another drawing. And here's, typical drawings that would go with how this lot grading is supposed to work. Very quickly, I want to talk about sanitary sewers and water mains. For the most part, they're designed to MOE guidelines and to what we call Ontario Provincial Standard Specifications and Drawings. And I mean, we refer to those documents and these standards that we help municipalities create because they're used throughout the province. Sanitary sewers are designed for two things. One, for flow from predicted sources. So if you got 1,000 homes and you know how often people are going to shower and run their dishwasher, flush the toilet, you can predict what the flows are. And then you need to provide for extraneous flows, some allowance for inflow and infiltration, which is around 30% of the total flow that you design for sanitary sewer. Many of your older sewers, and we know that in this community that we're sitting in, have much bigger problems with inflow and infiltration. Some of that's the age of the sewers, some of that's illicit connections, and other things. Water, again, there's two things you design in your water district. You design for peak flows. So you got to design your water system for the very instant that the maximum flow is expected. And we know from histories in communities how to calculate that. And then you got to design for fire flows. And just to note, you are not required to provide fire protection to the level every industry and every commercial person might want you to. So that's my presentation. That's questions on standards. But as I say, we've done that presentation many, many times to the municipalities, and I hope it's helpful. Questions?
Bruce, I have a question for you.
Anything, sir?
If you're putting a subdivision up that's close to a river, can you run the sanitary sewer into the river? Does it have to go into?
Sanitary sewer?
Sorry, the
Storm sewer.
storm sewer?
So,
Yeah.
Let's not put sanitary.
we haven't been putting sanitary sewers into rivers for some
Years.
time. That's
Yeah,
like
you
you
have
getting
been my
quantity and quality mixed up, what I see. So, depends where you are, okay? For example, and it depends what river you are and what watershed you're in. It seems silly to build a great big huge stormwater management pond for a massive subdivision beside the river in Goderich or even, we'll use Auburn as an example. We're not likely to get big subdivisions off it. Or beside Lake Huron to hold the water back when you know that when you start releasing it, the peaks might be starting to then come down from upstream. So there's a lot of examples where we would not be doing stormwater quantity control beside a receiving stream where it's a river or a lake, because you would know that you want to get that water out of there and gone before the water's coming down from upstream. So in fact, depending where we are in Listowel, the work we're doing with North Perth, the Maitland Conservation Authority there is not requiring stormwater quantity control immediately adjacent to the river for that reason. Is that the purpose of your question? Am I asking?
Yes. Yes.
There would still be an expectation to do some stormwater quality control, which is often a smaller pond, like that one I showed you in Bayfield, that picture.
Because it's got to pick up the sediment.
You would like to see some sedimentation.
Great.
Yes.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Chris.
I know some folks in the New Hamburg area. It's a rather new.
I don't work in New Hamburg, so I'm free.
So I can say anything I
You
want.
can say whatever you want,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's good. Anyway, it's just an example. And they have some set, quality ponds, you're calling them. And they, mosquitoes and they smell.
First of all, they shouldn't smell. I
There's
don't
a
know
lot
why
of
they,
stagnant.
I don't know why they would
Yeah.
smell. There's mixed reviews on the mosquitoes thing. If the ponds are big enough, I'm told that the studies some of the conservation authorities have done, if the ponds are big enough, there's enough wind to break up and create ripples that the mosquitoes are not an issue.
Waves.
Waves, yeah. But it always gets discussed. And some developers say, I can't build a pond because it's going to cause West Nile virus. But the Ministry of the Environment and the conservation authorities don't seem to buy that. And there seems to be, there's evidence that they say that they have, I don't have copies of it, that these should not be a problem as long as these ponds get big enough that there can be ripples. And they don't need to be waves, they need to be ripples, is what they're telling me. So the stagnant part, to me, is a case that there's not being enough flow through this thing. Maybe it doesn't rain very often in Hamburg, I don't know, but that would be an interesting thing to know about that,
It's
because
decomposition.
yeah, it's decomposition of organic
Organics, yeah.
materials, yeah. But usually there's enough flow that hasn't been an issue. I've seen only a couple with algae on them, and the ones that we've been involved with, and it's been small in terms of volumes. But
Should these ponds be empty?
they can be empty. If you go back and we'll start with this one. So here in the top right, the wet part, that's the quality pond where the sediment occurs. And you can't really see it further to the left, but there's another half of the pond there that's the quantity pond. And that's a dry pond, and that's empty. And this has a bit of algae, and that's the one I've seen algae in that I mentioned to you. I have never seen algae in this particular pond in Bayfield, and I've looked several times. I haven't heard any complaints. That doesn't mean they don't exist. This pond in this industrial park in Strathroy, the quality pond, the bottom right one, is going to be dry or almost dry all the time. And that quantity,
Get it ready.
the quality pond in the bottom left picture is big enough, I can't believe that there wouldn't be enough waves to break up any mosquito growth there. So
I guess
I've heard the argument,
yeah.
and I haven't personally had experience that's been detrimental. Whoops.
Your first example with a house about 50 feet away, I'd be real disappointed. I wouldn't live there. First of all, if I had young children, and for the reasons I cited. So does the municipality accept a liability issue with these things?
Well, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a risk management guy, but let me tell you
You
what I
must
say.
hear things.
Yes, I do. There's always debate about whether they should be fenced.
Yeah.
Okay, well, where I live in Goderich, I live 2 blocks from the lake. Nobody puts a fence around it. So living 2 blocks from a stormwater management pond, is that any different? Most of them are designed with quite shallow slopes. We're seeing in the bigger cities, they're trying to build bigger ponds, bigger facilities for bigger subdivisions and mix them in with amenity areas, parks, trails, things like that. And I think that's very effective. And in those kinds of cases, my own personal opinion is I don't think they should be fenced. If you have houses backing directly onto a pond, to me, that's a spot where it should be fenced. But if it's a park on the other side of a park area where there's walking trails and everything else, my opinion is I think it would be better if you could turn it into amenity and not fence it. Some of these dry ponds that are really, they do the stormwater quality with those oil grit separators, those massive manholes I showed you, and the pond is just for quantity control. And they're going to fill up and then be dry in 3 days after the storm. there's a lot less need to put fencing around those two.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Bruce.
You're welcome.
We're going to start with the next one. Before we start, I'm wondering if in our audience here, we have a lot of people from the county, and we have Dave here from our Economic Development Committee. I wonder if you could just stand up and say hello so the council has, the councilors know who you are when they meet you on the street another time.
Cody Jodry, I work in the Huron County Economic Development Department.
Chris Watson, I'm one of the two economic development officers working with Cody.
And I'm Sandra Weaver, I'm the Director of the Planning and Development Department, and I'm going to be presenting with Bruce for your next presentation.
And I have Lisa Courtney, one of our planners, with me to make notes and answer questions if there's any environmental assessment questions to help out for me.
Do you want to just stand up and introduce yourself so the councilors know who you are?
Dave Tiffin, I'm with the Wingham BIA and a member of the North Huron Economic Development Committee.
Thank you very much. And we all know Laura.
Hi.
Hi, Laura. And we all know Bill. Hi, Bill.
So, ready, sir?
We're ready.
I'll try not to
More
talk
than
as
ready.
fast with this one. So we came here tonight, and we believe these were our instructions to have BM Ross and the planning department to make a presentation to tell you how to get some building permits in Hutton Heights. And the decision of whether you go ahead or don't go ahead is yours. We acknowledge that to make this presentation, there are a number of tasks from a planning and engineering perspective. And if you're really going to do this, there's a huge commitment of resources, both time and financial. If you want to proceed with this development, there's some things that would be greatly impacted by starting them immediately to help keep that timeline in place. So for an agenda, and you've all got this presentation, it was sent to you as a PDF last week. I've added one word to it, so if you find the word as I'm going through it, I know I don't have a loonie in my pocket, but I'll promise whoever finds it. I want to give you some background as to what has happened in the past with work we've done on Hutton Heights for the previous councils. Go through the process, the planning, engineering, look at timing, costs, financing, and Donna's got some financing stuff too, and a few other notes, and then talk about next steps. And Sandra's going to do some of the presentation, and I'm going to do some of the presentation. So I'm going to be quiet now for a minute.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm just going to start with a bit of the background on this, just to set the context for the rest of the presentation. So North Huron purchased the property at Hutton Heights, which is approximately 37 acres in total, back in 2007 for $155,000. I was the planner for North Huron between 2006 and 2010, so I was here at the time that the municipality purchased the property, and my recollection was that the CAO at the time, the property came for sale, and the CAO at the time was concerned that someone might purchase the property and just want to build one house on it and, you know, sort of eliminate the opportunity for more development on lands that are designated or part of a designated settlement area. So the municipality purchased the property at that time. So first, if I could just get you to flip to the next, it's probably easier to look at a map so that you have a visual context of what I'm talking about here. So the property owned by North Huron is the rectangle at the south. You can see it's a 37 acres in total. It is located to the east of the sewage treatment plant there, and to the west of the existing Hutton Heights settlement area. As well, it's located to the south of Lloyd Street. So Lloyd Street runs east-west in there. So there are two other potential future development properties in this area. So the area to the north of Lloyd Street, just next to the sewage lagoons there, is owned by a private property owner as well. And there's opportunity there's some development potential on that piece, as well as right next, just east of the property that is owned by North Huron, is another approximately 5 acres that's owned by a private individual, and there's some future development potential on that as well. So if you flip to the official plan map, Bruce. So this is the official plan map for the Hutton Heights area. Looks like the yellow is a bit faded on there, but to the left-hand side of your screen is the sewage treatment lagoons, and then you'll see a strip of dark yellow and light yellow, or dark green and light green there. That is designated natural environment and parks and open space in your official plan. And the purpose of that, it's a buffer area between the sewage treatment plant or the lagoons and any development. So there's a required 200-meter buffer between development and those lagoons. So that area was sort of set aside for natural environment and parks and open space. And then the North Huron property, as well as the rest of the parcels there, are designated as residential in the official plan. So Bruce, if you flip to the next, the North Huron zoning bylaw basically corresponds to that. You see open space and natural environment, and then the FD stands for future development. And that's the zone that's given to larger parcels of land like this, where there is not yet a proposal for development. So it's almost like a holding zone until someone comes forward with a plan, and then it gets rezoned to residential or whatever the use is, residential low density or medium density or whatever the proposal is for the property. Yeah, so this next property gives you a sense of what the acreage is out there. So on the property owned by North Huron, the area in yellow where it says 15.5 acres, that's the area of future development potential. So it's staying out of that buffer area next to the sewage lagoons and out of the woodlot that's on the property owned by North Huron. The property to the north, where there's future development land, is approximately 10 acres. And then to the east, future development land of approximately 5 acres in size. So that just gives you sort of a rough idea of the acreage that's available for future development in that area. So I think I'll turn it over to Bruce.
So previously, we made presentations to council on at least three times, I think maybe it was 4, in 2005, 2008, and 2018. The 2005 report, we looked only at external servicing costs and the potential to service along Crawford. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Water was to be extended from Wingham. The sewage pumping station was proposed at the north end of Crawford. The possible cost of external works and for services on Crawford were provided in 2005. So this is a little map that shows the water main, and it would come from the corner of 4 and 86 out along 4 and service Crawford. And at that time, the subdivision was anticipated to go into the bush, and this was looking at about 100 lots. And similar, the sewage pumping station would be at the north end of Crawford. And that could still be the case, although we're looking at it this time along Lloyd. And if you got deeper into real design, you'd have to choose which is the best spot. But this was showing sanitary sewers on Crawford and then the green force main out to the sewage treatment facility. So in early 2008, I kept my loonie, nobody saw it. That previous report was updated, and once more there was probable costing provided for external works along with water and sewer on Crawford. But in the fall of 2008, there was a further presentation made to council, and lot layouts were reviewed, both on the municipal lands and on the privately owned lands to the north. And so the privately owned lands are in the top right, anywhere from 16 to 28 units. And on the bottom left, from 96 to 148 units. And again, this was going into the bush. And for the first time, there was some consideration given to actual internal servicing costs. And they were estimated based on a cost per lot basis, which was just arbitrary from other developments and not looked at really closely. And there were assumptions that all the lands, both the municipal one and the other development lands, will be serviced with water and with sewer. Then last year in 2018, the county and BM Ross were asked to update the previous presentation, and we primarily looked at assumptions on the external servicing costs. So we're back to Sandra and the planning process. You know, she uses smaller font
I couldn't resist that.
I don't need glasses yet. There's a planning process that would be required to get this property development ready to have building permits issued. And so there's planning applications and planning studies in order to prepare the property for development. So there would be a requirement for a plan of subdivision application as well as a zoning bylaw amendment application. So the zoning bylaw amendment application would be taking that FD future development zone and switching it to residential depending on the density of the development, either low density residential, medium density, depending on how the lot layout factored out. And then Bruce has talked about perhaps permitting the stormwater management and pumping station in the open space lands within that 200-meter buffer between the residential development and the sewage treatment plant. And public works like infrastructure facilities like that are permitted in any zone in North Huron, so benefiting the public. So there may be opportunity to locate some of those external things for the development in that area. So also an application would use what we call an integrated process with the Class EA for external works. So there is an opportunity to speed up the process for the EA and the planning applications if you do those together jointly in one notice and one public meeting. So certainly Bruce is familiar with that, and I am as well, and could help you with that. So there's also required studies, and when Bruce talked about if there's a couple of things that you might want to do that are time sensitive, he was referring to the first two studies on this list. So the first is an archaeological assessment, and the other is an environmental impact study for development around that woodlot there. And the reason why those are time sensitive is the environmental impact study. There's a few seasons that the study would be done over. And archaeology, generally the easiest way to do that study is to do it when the grounds are plowed. So if there's opportunity to do that before any crops went in this spring, then that would certainly speed up the process of getting those studies done. The other thing about the environmental impact study is considering, and I think it's really important for council to consider, if you're considering investing in putting infrastructure out to this Hutton Heights property, what opportunity does that leave for developing future development out there, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. So thinking about a road connection to the next property to the south. So that would require going through a little bit of that natural environment area that's there. So having the study look at where the appropriate location for that road connection might be in case the municipality ever wishes to permit development further to the south on the next property. So just thinking ahead about that. Planning justification, so what's the need, the housing types and the densities. And what I would be suggesting is that the municipality may benefit from a private planning consultant that would help you to coordinate the studies, do the planning justification, and help you prepare the planning applications for submission. And then there's a number of engineering studies which Bruce is going to get into, and Bruce indicated that some geotechnical work was done in 2018, and we would also, 2008, yes, and that we would consult with the county public works department to see if a traffic impact study was required there or not. So draft plan approval, I think that's sort of the end goal for this. So a successful application for a subdivision results in draft plan approval. And we say draft plan approval is the subdivision design is given approval, and county council is the approval authority for plans of subdivision. And that approval comes with a list of conditions that are fulfilled after the fact. So, some of the union gas, electrical, some of the engineering requirements.
Canada Post, conservation authorities,
Yeah.
MNR,
Yeah.
MTO, no, not MTO, county land, county roads.
Yeah. So basically, when the subdivision application gets circulated out to all of those agencies, a list of conditions is compiled and attached to the approval, and then there's the opportunity to work through those conditions and get clearance letters from those agencies prior to final approval of the plan of subdivision. So satisfying all of those agency requirements, doing the engineering designs, and then Bruce is far more versed on this than I am, but doing a subdivision agreement. And if the municipality is the developer, essentially it would be a subdivision agreement with yourself.
And incidentally, I was with your solicitor at another meeting I was aware, and I said, could we do this? Could we sign a subdivision agreement with ourselves? And he says, absolutely, you'd have to, because you would sell off portions and subsequent owners would inherit it. So I'd never really given that any thought before until I wrote this. So it would be necessary. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that takes us to the next slide.
So as part of our discussions, my staff prepared 6 options of development without encroaching in the bush. We always also look at some that did, but for the time being, we're concentrating on not going into the bush. And the number of units ranged from 72 to 118. I couldn't give you cost estimates for all of them. It would get too confusing tonight. So we just picked figure 2. I'll show you which one of this when we get there, which is a moderate density of 80 lots. And certainly there could be more density, and that could be discussed if the decision is to go ahead. But there are potential other adjacent areas. The north property, which Sandra talked about, possibly 20 lots. The Belden property to just to the east, 11 units. And there's also the possibility of existing lots, approximately 24, if I can count correctly, making sanitary and water connections to them if that's appropriate at some time. So for a total of 135 units, and I say that maybe because this has to be evolve further before you really know it. So there are a bunch of sketches here, and just quickly, the top left one is the least dense. The smallest number of biggest lots, 20 by 31 meters or 66 by 102 feet. So that would all be single family lots. The next one on the right there is 80 units. That's the one we've used for our cost estimate for this purposes. There's some mix of density there, and there's 66 of those bigger lots, and then there's 8 lots that are sort of, I'm going to do feet here, 34 by 102, and 6 lots that are smaller, and this would be townhouse lots of 25 by 102 feet deep. Here's 2 more examples. And you can see that the left one has even more higher density units. So in this case, there's 108 units total, 84 that are 16 meters wide or 55 by 102, and then a bunch that are 25 by 102, and then there's a few that are actually 25 by 114. Those lots wounded up a little bit deeper. On the right-hand side is another option we'd shown, which just has one access road coming in, which I'm not really favoring, but it's just another option. And Sandra did note that one of the things to think about is whether there's a route out at the bottom of this cul-de-sac in anything we choose to get beyond that if there's future development. And these could be adapted to make that route available. So on the right-hand side, that's make sure I've got my right note here. On the right-hand side, that's 78 units, all with the bigger lots. And the final 2 we looked at again with the single access are sort of a medium density version and a higher density version of that, to the point where the one on the right winds up with 118 units. So we did cost estimates based just on one of those options because I didn't think that I wanted to confuse you any more than I might anyway. Especially if I can't say quality and quantity and keep them straight. So from an engineering perspective, we've had to do a little bit of preliminary or conceptual design to try and figure out what it would cost to service these things. If you were to proceed, you would have to do a draft plan application, and there would be what's called a functional servicing report, which is a report where the developer would normally tell us how they're going to service this, which would include preliminary stormwater management. And we wondered about finding an outlet. I'm going to show you where it is in a second. There would need to be topographical survey work done. The geotechnical report was done in 2008. It may or may not be sufficient. We'd have to look at it more closely. And we'd have to talk about whether there's a traffic impact statement needed with county highways. And for this number of lots, there may not be, but we'd have to speak to them about that. And the engineering design, which is normally done sort of concurrently with the planning applications, would consist of all the water supply design, the sewage pumping station, force main, and sewage collection system, a final stormwater management design, the roads, including the reconstruction of Lloyd Street. I'm going to talk about that a bit more in a second. And then coordinating with utility companies and obtaining all the necessary approvals. So timing, how fast could all this get done? This little chart starts in June, which is only 3 weeks away. You can see that in that area, we're looking at starting the archaeology and starting the environmental study. At the same time, starting to work on some preliminary engineering. And as we get into the fall, you know, we're doing the draft plan submission, integrating the EA with that. And as we get into the next slide, getting into January next year, hopefully getting all that wound up, having draft plan approval, getting approvals of all your MOE applications, with construction as early as April of 2021. It's not impossible construction of servicing could start next fall, but it's maybe unlikely. And building permits then in the spring of 2021. So that could happen. But to do that, you've got to get started immediately. Costs. This first line is very important. Subdivision development is an expensive proposition. And the profitability, or in your case, the viability of an exercise of this is most often an exercise on how fast you can sell lots and what the cash flow is. And the real developers spend a lot of time looking at their marketing and how fast they can sell lots, because that dictates whether they can make money or not. So the township is going to need to decide to what level they wish to play this game and how much they want to be involved. And you could start this ball rolling and at any level look for investments from private developers to take over the process, or you can do it yourself. That's up to you. So we did some cost estimates, and I got to tell you some of our assumptions. First of all, we only had topographic information, which is the province's 1 meter contour mapping. So it's not horribly accurate, but it's probably good enough for what we're doing today. But there would need to be a full topographic survey to confirm those elevations, because that greatly changes perhaps depths of sewers and how you do your stormwater design and some of those kinds of things as you proceed through this. All our estimates were made on sort of conceptual preliminary designs, construction costs, all include allowances for engineering and some contingencies, but not HST. And all those construction costs we've done are based upon historic construction costs that we've seen in the industry. So in our office in Goderich, we mostly do reconstruction of existing municipal roads. We're very good at pricing that. Our Sarnia office does a lot of subdivision work. So they're very good at having a database of costs on what we would call a greenfield site, where there's never been anything there before to get in the way. So I would hope that we've got some representative costing in what we've done on this today. And some construction notes. We're showing the pumping station at the west of the subdivision on Lloyd, and we're showing in our preliminary design the sewers deep enough to service to the north end of Crawford. That could get flipped if through a final design process you decided this was a better spot. But the municipality owns this land in the buffer zone west of what would be the subdivision, and I don't know about ownership of land at the end of Crawford and that, so we kind of thought we would try this. The stormwater management pond is proposed to outlet down Lloyd and into a small ditch along the sewage plant site, and then it would go to the river. And to do that, because Lloyd kind of slopes a bit this way, we're going to slope it a bit this way and reconstruct Lloyd Street. So that's probably a bit more cost than what we looked at. And all of the interior streets in Lloyd, within the limit of the subdivision would be then proposed to be built to an urban standard. The site can be serviced in several phases. So you could open up only 10 or 20 lots at a time. But to do that, you still have to build the sewage pumping station, you still have to build the water main from town, you still have to build this stormwater management pond. So you're gonna spend an awful lot of your money up front. And if we want to investigate how that phasing could work, we could give you a better idea how that investment would look. But I would suspect you might spend probably half of the funds, that's a very rough number, just to get started. So this is the sketch that we based our assumption on. You can see we're showing a little sewage pumping station just west of the developed lots, and then we're showing the stormwater management a little further down the road. And that's strictly schematic at this point in time. It's not the scale, just showing you where we would put it. And this is the cross section, the development standard that we talked about 20 minutes ago. And you're going to have some startup costs. So you paid for the land. There's planning studies. There's legal, there's survey, and included in that, in stage 1 and 2, is an archaeology of $6,000, and then the environmental studies of $11,000. In that $60,000 for the planning studies to kind of get things started. I don't know where you are in terms of current carrying costs or expenses since you bought the property, and Dawn and I talked about the other day. I don't know whether she's researched that or not. That works up to $2,700 a lot. Internal servicing costs. So this is the stuff that's just dedicated to these 80 lots. It's about $3.4 million or $43,000 per lot. And that includes the internal roads and the Lloyd Street reconstruction, the water distribution. That's the local water mains, the sanitary sewers, the local water mains going over to the pumping station, stormwater management and storm sewers, and some allowances for electrical and utilities. And what you pay for electrical is a function of how fast you develop it. I'm not even going to try to explain it tonight, but we can go through that further later on. Is that going to be, that'll be Hydro 1 out there doing, do we know? Yeah.
Yes.
So external servicing costs, and I'm presenting the same numbers I did a year ago. We actually think that they're reasonably good at 1.8 million, 800 for the water and 1 million for the sanitary. I rounded it a little bit more. So for 80 lots, that external servicing cost would be $22,000 per lot. If we service all 135 of those folks that I listed, that works out to $13,300 per lot. So you can see the benefit of servicing other properties. So the total cost is a minimum of $45,700 per lot, and the external costs, as we said, total startup and internal costs are a minimum of $45,700 per lot. We don't know what other costs Dawn has had, and the external cost could be $13,300 to $22,500. These are again not fully refined final design type numbers. I'm going to have one slide on financing, and Dawn's going to say some more stuff. I am not aware of any grants that are available from the province that would be dedicated and assist in development and opening up new areas. And there may be others that know of it, but I'm not available. Certainly, you could do some of your water and sewer funding or borrowing from reserves, and the external costs, portions of those could come from development charges. So we've got a category here of other notes. First of all, a disclaimer, I guess neither the county nor PM Ross are marketing experts. We don't think we can tell you how fast these lots would sell. I want to talk about building permits. In a normal development agreement, we would require the developer to have certain levels of servicing complete before we'd issue building permits. I think if you're going to be a developer yourself, you should have the same rules for yourself to be consistent, or you'll have trouble with other developments going forward. So next steps. I think it's always important to say do nothing, because that's something that you could do. Council's been good at doing it on this site for some time. You could also go out to industry right now and say, here's what we got, here's some reports that we've got. We could put our document here into a better report and see if there's any expressions of interest. And Sandra has noted that these fine two gentlemen to my right would assist with some of that process if it was necessary. Or you could proceed and you could commence some of these studies, hire engineers and planners, make the planning applications, do the engineering, take it to draft plan approval, and then either ask for expressions of interest or proceed as a developer. But if you really want to proceed, I think if nothing else, you need to start the environmental impact natural heritage work, because it's more time sensitive even than the archaeology, but they both should be considered. So questions. First of all, I hope that this generates considerable discussion and questions. It certainly hasn't told you everything you need to know, but we've put together as much as we can in the time we had. And I think I'm going to say this again, even with phasing and staging the works, there's considerable upfront expenditures to get the first phase, first 20 lots or whatever might be in place. That's the end of my presentation. So do you want to do questions with me first, or do you want Donna to do her thing? I don't know what your idea is.
I think if council doesn't mind, I think I'm going to have finish with Donna, and then we'll open the floor up to questions and comments, because I think this is the most important part coming up, the money part.
Sure, I'll be nice and warm.
Okay, there we go. So thank you, Bruce and Sandra, that was great. So the same, this is some preliminary information, and if I followed Bruce's presentation along, so the total servicing cost of this project would be approximately $5,455,000. As we talked about, the land that was purchased in 2007 was $155,000. Bruce talked about the planning and startup costs at $60,000. Internal costs at 3.4 million, external costs at 1.8 million. So that gives you your total cost. And he also broke it down for you on a price per lot. And again, I followed suit using the 80 lots that Bruce is referring to. But of course, if you were able to go up to the 135, then 35 lots, and that would change that. So you'd be looking at somewhere around 68.2 per lot to get the services there. So of course you want to know what sort of tax dollars would that bring in a perfect world if all of these lots were developed. So if you were looking at a residential unit assessed at $200,000 and you looked at the first 20 lots that Bruce was talking about, at the East Wawanosh tax rate for 2019, that would give you $1,849 per unit, or with the 20 units, $36,972. And if you look at out over 25 years, then you're looking at $924,500. And then it goes up in the multiples if it was possible to go from 20 units to 40 units, then to 80 units, and the possibility of 100 units out there. So you'd be looking at over 25 years, some pretty significant tax dollars if we were able to get some of this off the ground. And the same would be for the annual water and sewer bill. Again, it's $1,100 a year that we collect. On 20 units, you'd be looking at the $22,000, and then again over the same 25 years for those 20 units, you'd be looking at $553,000 up to, if you got 100 units on board, that would be $2,768,400. So again, some significant dollars there. So for other economic benefits, this isn't my area of expertise. These two fellows here could go on, I'm sure, with more of the benefits that come from development. But certainly, as you know, for a municipality of this size, we have an abundance of programs and facilities that we provide for a population of less than 5,000. So as you know, we're always looking for increased usage at the libraries, the rec centers, and daycare. And also we hear our employers talking about the need for any sorts of development, of course, would provide employment for the trades, but you're always looking for ways to have employment in the community as well, and provide, of course, increased foot traffic and business for your local merchants. One of the big things, the buzzwords these days are the local housing. There's such a lack of affordable housing. And that Bill 108, More Homes, More Choices, has just come out on May the 2nd. So I'm going to be attending some seminars and stuff to find out more information about that. But one of our biggest problems here at North Huron is growing the assessment base. As you know, we have the lowest assessment in all of Huron County in North Huron. So that's definitely where we're looking, is to how can we grow here? And then, of course, you have the possibility of increasing property values. So when we talk about the external costs of the water and sewer at 1.8 million, with 800,000 coming from water and $1 million for sewer, we do have enough money that we have saved up in our water and sewer reserves that we could borrow out of that. These would be some of the, I'm assuming these would be the costs that would be needed right up front. These would be some of the first dollars that you'd have to lay out, as Bruce was talking about. So you could pay back those reserves at the current rate for construction loans is 2.31. So you could pay it back, or if council made the decision not to pay it back until you sold the land or whatever, you could do that. But it's really not fair to the work that we've done on building up those reserves not to keep them replenished. So then out of the whole cost, as I said, there'll still be another $3.5 million that you're going to have to look at how you're going to finance that. And as Bruce was saying, again, you wouldn't need all of this up front, but if you decided to proceed, that's something you'd have to determine, is to get assistance to actually get some more refined numbers on how much money would be required up front. And I'm saying in the first 2 years, year and a half, I guess is what I call up front. And so the current rate for long-term borrowing right now at 20 years is 3.04. Bruce alluded to the implementation of new development charges, which we could take a look at that. And then also partnering up front and pre-selling some of the land, as soon as possible. And then we did get our one-time modernization grant of $532,000 that we did get recently. So we haven't made a strict plan on how that one is going to be used at this time. But as Bruce said, the thing to do would be, if you decide to move ahead on this, you'd have to move ahead quickly. And one of the very first things would be to talk to your tenant. The land is rented out there for 2019. And the lease is up at the end of 2019. But as Sandra talked about, some of the the 4 seasons and 3 seasons of work that would have to be done. And there is some plowing required, which our current tenant is a no-till farmer. So you'd have to be talking to him and just see if you could make some arrangements for 2019 when he has it rented, so that you don't lose the whole year until the lease is up. Like if you wanted to move ahead, you'd want to be talking to him right away and see what you could do to get some of this started yet in 2019 and not waste the rest of this year. So those are just some of the quick comments that I have as well to follow up and taking and building on what Bruce and Sandra have been talking to you. And again, it's just some preliminary things that we've talked about here as staff since we knew the presentation was coming forward. So if you want to open it up to questions then, so that we can see what direction council is interested in going.
So I am going to open up to the floor. Questions. This is quite an undertaking. Go ahead, Chris.
There'll be lots of questions through you, Reeve. There'll be lots of questions, but I just want to zero in on one thing. Your residential assessed value of 200,000. It's just a grab value, I guess. But I don't see a new house being built for that. And I know MPAC, but they're pretty close to what the values are today. the resale values are. And I would have guessed like it's easily $200 a square foot, and these would be 1,500 square feet, I'm guessing.
Right, so, and actually, so I had done the presentation first at $350,000, which is more what a residential unit would be, but a residential home, but that's really, what it seems to be saying, and this is where we need more research, is that it's not really, standalone residential homes that is what is affordable and what is needed in the communities. It would be more of a, some sort of multi-units, that sort of thing, and those are the ones that are assessed at 200,000. But I said it's just ballpark numbers. We have until we get further along this path and know, whether we do go all residential lots or combinations of multis and residential lots. It's too early to say right at the moment. But anyway, that is certainly is a conservative number, and I do have the numbers at 350 if you wanted to see those as well.
Other questions, comments? Go ahead, Trevor.
So in having a lot, if you, based on all the costs associated to that would say any developer or the municipality would have to sell that lot for higher than $70,000 to make any money off the lot, in essence. And again, in the surrounding municipalities, I would argue that's probably pretty consistent of a land lot value. The biggest thing for us, or at least for me, is what is the payback? What's the payback to doing this? The payback is you have residential property out there. Based on those conservative numbers, it would take 25 years to pay back the money that if we invested in ourselves to pay back that money. And then after 25 years, it's all.
You're gonna sell the lots too.
I get it. Yeah, I know that. I'm being ultra conservative. Put it that way, Bruce. So my biggest thing is that I think in my mind, for what we've been talking about over the last 5 years on council, is doing nothing is not the alternative. Doing nothing is not the alternative. We can't afford to do nothing. What I think we have to be able to afford to do is to get the process begun to be able to then have something to sell. And right now we have nothing to sell because nobody wants to invest that time and effort in doing these studies for the municipality to do nothing with. So my thoughts are, let's get it to a point where we can get something concrete and then go to look for somebody who wants to partner with the municipality as to say, here it is. Here's something that we've done the work, we've put some investment in this, we're willing to work with you. But we can't afford to put all the costs, the $5 billion costs in. But let's talk about how we do this appropriately for both you to make money and us to get tax base, because for us, tax base is everything. The debt doesn't matter if we're getting tax money to offset it. If we weren't getting any tax money, we're just throwing the money away, taxpayers are gonna be very upset. But if we can show investment in the municipality, I don't know how many properties were on the Rutledge subdivision. Can somebody tell me that?
16, I think.
16? 16.
Yeah, 25% of them.
16, yeah. So, 80 lots. What I'm hearing in the county, what I'm hearing around is we can't find places to build. Well, we've got 80 units that are ready to build. We just need to figure out how to get it there. And I think doing nothing isn't the right answer. We need to figure out ways to get costs in our budget, affordable costs, and move these studies ahead. Only problem I have is, can somebody tell me how long do these studies last? If you do the study now, if it 5 years comes around, do I have to do the study again?
So normally, if a developer was doing this,
yes,
and in the world I see, the private sector doing this, they would do these studies And they would get draft plan approval for 3 years, and if they can't get their conditions waived, they might get that renewed once or even twice, and nobody would be asking them to update the studies. So the studies themselves don't have an expiry date on them. It's a case of, does the county planning department who approves subdivisions really then decide this thing is so old that we really shouldn't be renewing this again and again and again and again. And I was at a meeting today where I think the draft plan approval has been renewed 5 times, and the developer is just decided he's going to go ahead and do it, I think. So that would be, he's in the beginning of his 5th year, so he's at 13 years right now. And nobody's talking about the studies on the work he's done to date, although he wants to go further, and that creates another heckle for him, but that's a different thing. So the studies themselves are studies, and they're good. If you go far enough that you get approvals from the various agencies, if we need an approval from the Conservation Authority, it's only good for a certain period of time. We need approval from MOE for sewers and stormwater management works. They're only good for 5 years. There is a process, a more simplified process than starting from scratch, that you can go and get. I don't know, Lisa, that if we do the EA integrated approach with the plan of subdivision, it's probably good for 10 years. Yes. That's why I brought her along. She's my conscience on the environmental assessment.
I sit over his shoulder.
Where you can't see her. But when we're doing it with the integrated approach, I don't know if you keep renewing draft plan approvals, what that does. We're not going to worry about something that's 10 years from now. So most of this stuff is good for a considerable period of time, Joe.
That's my concern.
Other questions, comments? Go ahead.
I have a comment. Yeah, I think people are desperate for housing here. People are. I was just at the physicians recruitment committee this morning, and it is hard to find doctors here because there is no housing for them. They can't find houses. There's a doctor moving to Listowel because there's no housing list in Wingham available, and that's just local hospitals. There are plenty of businesses who want to settle here, but can't find housing for their employees. So I think it's, you have to spend money to make money is what we say, but I think it's a great idea to get started with Hutton Heights and as soon as possible, and try to get developers involved as well, because it's a huge amount of money.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Want to, go ahead, Joe.
I know we haven't, I just did another comment. The external costs that you talk about, is any of those costs to connecting existing units already settled in units out there?
No, it's in essence, we go buy a lot of those, like in the route we're taking.
Right.
But no, we weren't connecting them in this.
Okay.
Do the existing houses have to go on sewage and water, or is that up to them?
It's up to you.
That's up to me.
Well, not you.
No.
Up to this group. I wouldn't put it all on your shoulders.
So I'm just going to answer a bit of that too, because I've got a few hours in this. Dwayne and I and our staff and our county have quite a few hours in this. We've been working on it quite hard. No, they don't have to hook up. And I personally would not spend that kind of money to hook up somebody that's already paying taxes out there now. So I vision that we would have it ready to go, and as their systems shut down or as they decide they can pay the hookup fees and hook in at that point, I would prefer we target more the new development, so that if we're going to run a line down a street, I want to be able to hook 2, 2, 2, not 1, 1, 1 because of costing factors. I am really, as your Reeve, in favor of going ahead with the first studies. And we'd like the opportunity with working with the county and with BNM Ross and with my staff to further the rest of it and come back before council as things develop. I personally see pre-selling the lots, and I have a lot of different ideas, but I'm not a developer. But I'm more than willing to continue to spend the time, because this council was not hired to stay the way it was. there was a clear message. And that is, we cannot afford our taxes. And no matter how you cut it, and cut it, and cut it, you cannot plow your streets and save any more money than you're doing now. We're to the bare bones. So we need to take this strong leap forward. And we're not inventing the wheel here. This is done in many municipalities. This is just the first time it's been done in North Huron. And I think since Mr. Kuyvenhoven came to town 40 years ago, the first time it's been done in Wingham, Blythe, or East Wawanosh. So is there any further comments or questions? We put together a bit of a motion, and I'm going to get Dwayne to read it because it's in Dwayne's writing.
So this is a draft motion that the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives a report of the Township's engineer and the Huron County Planning Director dated May 6, 2019 regarding Hutton Heights for information purposes. And further, that staff be directed to initiate an archaeological assessment environmental impact study for the purposes of developing a plan of subdivision on the lands commonly referred to as Hutton Heights. And further, the staff be directed to advise the renter of the Hutton Heights lands of council's direction to commence an archaeological assessment environmental impact study, and that the notification be provided in accordance with the existing rental agreement.
Do I have a mover? Kevin, do I have a seconder? Anita, final comments or questions? Trevor?
Donna, those, where would we take that, where would that be in our budget? Like we would pull from reserves, I'm guessing?
Yeah, you have a couple of choices since the money isn't in the 2019 budget. So in the economic development budget, you had $20,000 for us for special projects. So that's a possibility there. You also had $50,000 in the economic development budget to, for the purchase of some sort of future land or something like that. Or your third option is also to take it out of reserve. So I haven't been to the Economic Development Committee meeting, so I don't know if they have that 20,000 already earmarked for something else. If so, then we would have to take it out of reserves, basically.
Could I just follow up with that,
Yeah.
Donna? And I was reading, so you may have said it and I missed it. We also have Lisa Thompson and the Ford government just gave us $500,000, and it's under the Municipal Modernization Fund. And it was a one-time cash influx. So if we want, we can use that also. Although having said that, this is phase one. I was kind of going to try to hold that money back for another item that Dwayne and I have been working on. But we do have different revenues that have come to us without affecting our 2019 budget. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. Everyone in favor? Passes. Thank you. Thank you, council. This is going to be a fantastic step forward. It will be hard work for all of us. Lots of conversation, but it is a good move. It is a new tax generating idea. Okay. Thank you very much, folks. Okay. We're going to go to reports now. Clerk's Department. Don't forget anything. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. I think I jumped ahead there. Sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. So just in terms of, Carson's not able to be here tonight, but he did provide this report for council's consideration, and it's with respect to some shared training funds that are currently in the 2019 budget. More specifically, council has $2,500 allocated in your budget, council budget, for training purposes, and that money is for training for all of council. There is an item on the agenda with respect to drainage. And just in terms of, staff recently attended a Drainage Act training course last week, which was very informative. and very detailed in terms of the process. And staff are recommending council's consideration of allocating some of that $2,500 to invite an individual to come to do a presentation or discussion with council with respect to that drainage piece. Simply because there is a process that is to be followed, or there is a process under the Drainage Act. And just in terms of making sure that council understands the process, and depending on, there is decisions that council makes through that process, that council is aware in terms of what those decisions mean. In particular, if you're going through the Drainage Act process and you stop the process, there's a potential financial cost to municipalities. So just making sure the council knows and understands that. You do have a petition. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but there is a drainage item on your agenda for tonight that I don't want to jump ahead. Kirk was unable to be here tonight. So staff are recommending that that item be deferred. But further to that, in terms of, it also provides an opportunity for council as well to receive that drainage training information as well. So if council is so inclined, there is a motion there in Carson's report for council's consideration.
That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the clerk dated May 6, 2019 regarding the authorization of shared training funds for drainage training for information purposes, and further that the Council of the Township of North Huron authorizes the use of shared council training funds for drainage training to be held on May 10th special council meeting. Do I have a mover? Trevor and Chris, comments, questions?
Yep.
Go ahead, Anita.
Morstenberry is doing some major drainage work too. Can we invite their council as well, or some members?
Would you like to look into it?
Yes. Here.
Yep, we can look when we'll, we don't need a motion.
So we can share the notes.
Yep. Yeah. Motion to invite Morris Turnberry Council to our training session on May 10th.
So we'll make that amendment on top of the motion that's on the floor now. Can I get this first, seconder?
It's fine.
First. You're both fine?
Yep.
And you had a,
Yeah, comment.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm really glad for this because, you know, to have some training before we're actually dealing with a case is a wonderful idea. Is the other one time sensitive at all? The one with lawn toll, is it time sensitive or not?
I don't believe so. The other drainage that were shut
Right,
down.
so the one that is on the council agenda for tonight, actually, we're proposing that to move that to the special council meeting on Friday.
Okay.
So it was 5 days.
No problem.
That's good. All in favor of the amended motion?
Mhm.
Carries. Okay, Finance Department. There's nothing on for tonight.
Oh, yeah, there is.
There is?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Big one.
Oh, sorry. Did I miss a big one?
Major.
Donna, did you want to take over?
Sure, thank you, Reed. So when we passed our budget on March the 18th, we didn't have the county and school board rates at that time. And so those have since come in. And as I had, we had discussed that night, it should make the overall final picture a little more palatable for us in the end. So I have updated the schedule, the little table that was in your first report that only showed the municipal portion. And just for an example, when we looked at that on March the 18th, a residential property assessed at $202,750 was going to go up $211.59 in Wingham, $16.67 in Blythe, and $21.60 in East Wampanoag. Now that we've been able to blend the other two sets of tax rates into the equation, this same property then in Wingham would end up going up $182.23 or 4.41%. Blythe would actually, this same property, if it were in Blythe, would go down $12.69. And if it was in East Wampanoag, it would go down $7.75. So I'll just run through that table quickly then. A farm property, if this farm property, it's not in Wingham, but it's in East Wawanosh, but it would go up 1,256.11. If it was in Blythe, it would go up 660.88. This particular property actually happens to be in East Wawanosh, so it would go up 616.03. And if we look at some commercial properties, this particular property is actually in Wingham. So it had assessment last year of $825,250, this year $835,250. So it will go up $712.58. But if it was in Blythe, or it would go down $164.63, and if it was in East Wawanosh, it would go down $139.83. So again, a little more palatable than what we had looked at on March the 18th for the municipal portion only. So I just wanted to flip to the next table in my report. We just outlined where the dollars were raised from. So on that table, it shows that Wingham generates, or the dollars that come out of Wingham is $5,454,529, or 58.16%. Out of Blythe, $1,565,550, or 16.69%. And out of East Wawanosh, $2,359,067, or 25.15%. Out of our total tax levy of $9,379,147. And then the following table just outlines that 63.57% of those dollars stay here in North Huron. We send the county 23.76%, or $2,227,000, and we send to the various school boards 12.67%, or $1,188,000. So the bylaw to approve our tax rates is included in the bylaw section of the agenda. And if you wanted to also have a look at the attachment that was attached in your agenda package, we follow these various properties that we've been following all through the budget process, and we'll follow these particular properties over the next 4 years while you're in council. And so we just make sure that we can monitor them from year to year so that you get familiar with the property and what they paid the previous year. So you can look at those, but I think you're now familiar with most of those properties. So are there any questions then on this portion? And then, as I said, we won't be passing the tax rate bylaw until later on in the agenda.
Okay. So the motion is that the Council Township of North Huron hereby receive a report from the Director of Finance in regards to 2019 tax rate bylaw for information purposes, and further that the bylaw 44-2019 be passed under the bylaw section of the agenda. Do I have a mover? Rick? Trevor? Questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Passes. Thank you, Donna. Now we're going to go to recreation and community services, 7.3.1. Okay. And I'm going to read the motion first, then we'll have a conversation with it. And Trevor's leaving. Okay. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby support the request of the Wingham Hitmen Fastball Club in making application to the AGCO/LCBO for a special occasions permit to hold a beer garden in conjunction with the annual co-ed slow pitch ball tournament on July 19th, 20th, and 21st, 2019 at Riverside Park in Libro Field, Wingham. And further that the council proclaim the event of a municipal significance, and further that the council authorize the exemption of the noise bylaw 2009, extending the noise bylaw from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. on the dates of July 19th, 20th, and 21st, 2019. Do I have a mover? Chris and Anita, questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Passes. Thank you. (7.3.2) that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby waives the municipal alcohol policy required for off-duty police officers or private security companies personnel to be present for the upcoming barn dance campout jamboree being held at the Blythe Community Arena and Community Center from May 23rd, 24th, and 25th, 2019. Do I have a mover?
Move.
And seconded by Paul. And any questions or comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Reeve, is the place still insured? Are the insurance companies happy enough without the police or security? Does it affect liabilities? Do we know anything about that?
I'm going to ask Vicky to address that.
Through you, Your Worship. This is a requirement strictly implemented by the municipality. It's really geared at dealing with events where the general public is coming in and there's maybe unknown to, or it would be unknown to the organizers, and events that tend to be more rowdy in nature and things. Based on the type of event it is, the Jamboree is ongoing all day and things. It's not a party that you go into and you're dancing and drinking a lot. It's more of a concert type of event and things, and that's why there's no concern about it.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Passes. 2.3.3, the KAOS Ball Tournament request. That the Council of the Township of North Huron support the request by the KAOS Baseball Club in making application to the AGCO/LCBO for a special occasions permit to hold a beer garden in conjunction with the first annual Huron County Softball Tournament on June 7th, 8th, and 9th, 2019 at the Ball Diamonds in Blythe. And further, that the council proclaim the event of municipal significance. And further, the council authorizes the exemption of the noise bylaw 20-2009, extending the noise bylaw from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. on the dates of June 7th and 8th, 2019. Do I have a mover? Trevor and Kevin is the seconder. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. Passes. Thank you. And this is 7.3.4. And the motion reads that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Recreation and Community Services dated May 6, 2019 regarding the draft terms of reference for the North Huron Museum Committee for information purposes, and further that the staff be directed to prepare a bylaw adopting the terms of reference or a version thereof at the May 21st, 2019 council meeting. Do I have a mover? We'll go with Paul, seconder. Rick, questions and comments? Go ahead, Chris.
There's a fair difference between the terms of reference for the museum and the one for the dam, bridge dam. And this one seems to be more of, I'm just looking at the number of people that would be on the committee. There's more that would be very optimistic, positive, and I'm sensing that it's one that I know council has the final say, so that's out of the question. That's that. But the committee, it seems like they are commissioned to come up with a positive idea of how to deal with the museum, move it, and all that. That's what I got out of it. Is that what we're wanting from this committee? Is a proposal back to us is, yep, this is how we do it and how we fund it and blah, blah, blah.
I'm going to open that question up to the rest of council. And maybe we'll have, go ahead, and then we'll have Dwayne speak to that.
Yeah, do we want this as a committee of council? Can't they just start as a separate committee and then come up with a plan and with a suggestion?
The same way we're doing with the dam?
No.
No.
The dam is a committee of council, but of the dam bridge is a committee of council. But these people, are they already in a museum committee, or are they all the people who are mentioned, like from Els Monroe and all of them?
Interested parties.
I'm
Interested parties.
I'm going to ask either Dwayne or Vicky to answer that. Which one feels more comfortable to start?
Through you, your
Vicky?
worship. So, if you recall at the meeting in February, there was a presentation, made by Mr. Kaivenhoven, regarding, interested parties that would, be willing to contribute volunteer hours that would reduce the time that would be required to de-accession items and prepare, the artifacts in the museum, to move to the train station. So that's where the different groups were identified, because it is those groups who are coming forward saying that they have this interest, they want to see the project move forward. So that's why they were specifically identified, because they're willing to come forward with the volunteer hours that would reduce the cost. The decision to move to the train station has not yet been made. So it's a lot of it based on the conversations that we've had in this room is based on costs. So during the budget process, there was a lot of discussion about how much this is going to cost the municipality. There's a portion of this work that has to be done regardless of whether or not museum services continue. The de-accessioning of the artifacts does need to occur. And this group is willing to come forward with volunteer resources to reduce the rest of the cost that would be associated directly with moving to the train station. In order for us, our council, to be able to consider whether or not to move forward to that train station, it was felt that that group needs to come forward with some kind of cost estimates to show how they can reduce the cost of what it would be for council to consider to move. Does that kind of make sense as to what I'm saying? Is that during my earlier presentations, I provided information that was given to the previous council last summer and things, and said that there was a cost estimate for the first 24 months and things, and that we were going to have to hire a staff member, and they were going to have to do this, this, and this, and it was going to be over a 24-month period. This group is coming forward saying that they can do some of the work, which would reduce the cost of the municipality. And during the budget process, we seem to be concerned about what that cost would be to actually transfer or relocate things to that train station. We don't know how much of that cost they can reduce. So they need to come up with a plan and say, okay, this can be done by volunteers, so this will reduce the cost by this amount, and so on. And then they need to tell us how they plan to do it and things, and how they plan to fundraise and all those different things, so that we can bring it forward to council and say, okay, here's what the group is saying they can do, or the committee can say that they're going to do to address these costs. Is this enough for council to feel that it can move forward with relocating it to the train station? Does that kind of answer your question?
I'm going to get Dwayne. To follow up on that a bit if you want, Dwayne, if you want.
No. Okay.
Vicky, I'm going to get Dwayne to follow up on that a bit. Give you a bit of time to think that. Go ahead.
So in terms of council.
Yeah, do we need a committee of council? Does Vicky need to be there? Does somebody from council need to be there? That's my main concern, because we've always said costs are too much, and we're involving Vicky, that will cost money. One council member needs, or two, or whoever wants to be there, needs to be paid, so.
They're free.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
So just in terms of the differences between the two committees, the House and Dam Committee, the question is what? That committee is being tasked to decide. What is it that we should be doing in the Dam Committee situation? And that's ultimately a decision or recommendation that will come back to council, and council will make that decision. In terms of the Museum Committee, it's part of a question of what, but we're further along in the process. I think the bigger question is how. How would we do this? And as Vicky has indicated, there's a number of groups that have come to the table that are interested in moving, if the project at some point is approved by council, the project would be moving the museum to the train station. Okay. And these groups, and you'll notice in the terms of reference, there's various groups who have come forward who are interested in this project or in this initiative. And they're basically saying, as Vicky's indicated, they want to get behind this and they want to see this happen. But I think as a council, in terms of you need to know what the plan is and you need to know how it's going to be done, in my mind, before you can make any decisions in terms of whether or not you as a council or we as a municipality are behind this or not. But further to that, in terms of our involvement, it's my view, I guess, that it should be a committee of council on the basis that that group will be coming forward to council. The thinking from a staff's perspective is that the how will be all laid out and all of the various stakeholders will all have a role in that. And as a municipality, I would suggest that we want to have a role in that too. And ultimately, I think those groups want us to have a role. So what that role is in terms of, is it financially? Is it expertise? There's, from a staff's perspective, in terms of there's other resources, other expertise out there that we can tap into, or expertise that they as a group, they may come to us as municipality. But just in terms of us, if we're not as municipality engaged, then it's difficult to make decisions if we don't even know what the discussions are and what has taken place is the thinking around that. I guess the question is,
It's not that I'm against it or something like that. It's just that I think, like, do we need that? Do we need that, or can we just have them start it with their very involved people? It's awesome that they find so many volunteers for that, but can they start by themselves, or do we need council and staff with that? That was my main concern. So and cost.
Yeah, and I think through the REEV that it is possible for them to go ahead as a group in terms of and they can proceed if they wish. I think going back to the comments earlier in terms of they came to council, and I think they're looking for municipality involvement. But that's just my comments.
Vicki, did you want to follow up on that a bit?
I just really want to concur with the CEO that they were the ones that approached the township about establishing a committee, wanting the township to buy into it and to give them the opportunity to do what they wanted to do. It is a municipal asset, so we do want to have involvement. And based on the terms of reference and things, they would be reporting back to council, and council obviously would have the final say, but I think having that connection to the committee and part of the process will give us greater insight into what's going to be happening and understanding what the overall project is and timelines and what type of involvement we would and support we would need to provide rather than it coming just out of the blue to council and asking for your support. At least this way we're involved throughout the whole process.
And then Trevor, you had some comments?
My comment was, it's better that council's involved in it all the way through, as opposed to them just coming with a proposal and then we go, that's not the kind of proposal we're hoping for, and then they're back to the square one. So as long as, because we're gonna have the REEV there as an ex officio, or a member of council, but the REEV's gonna be an ex officio member, he's got the pulse of council, so that at the end of the day, if at these meetings, or if a member of council's at these meetings and it starts going in a direction that council's not consistent with, then it can be pulled back, as opposed to having 3 or 4 meetings of this committee coming to council after they've all said and done, and then we find out that, no, that's not really the intention of this, and then we've really wasted 6 months or whatever amount of time. I just think it's better that we have constant communication throughout the process till the time for decision making, because then it doesn't delay the decision making. Because if they were coming with a proposal, we're going to look at that proposal, then it's going to wait a week or 2 weeks before the next council meeting. If we're already involved in the process all the way through, by the time it comes to here, we've already invested. So we've already got a possible decision in our hands, and we can make that decision forthright.
Yeah, I'm just gonna follow up, and then I'll take Chris and then Paul. And you need, I believe there's legal responsibility for us to be involved because if some of the artifacts come up missing, and I can think of a $1,500 milk bottle, that guy'd be really upset. Go ahead, Chris, you're first.
I guess where I was going when I first started, when I first brought it up, questioned it, I'm seeing five people that are all wanting to go one way. And I'm not saying it's a wrong way, but a one direction. And there needs to be people on the committee that maybe ask those difficult questions.
So you're suggesting we should back up and advertise for people to be on the committee?
Well, it was suggested for 3, and and we have no idea who they would be. But I'm just saying it would be wise for us, and like Trevor was saying, it would perhaps save time as long as there's people asking those questions and making it making it a little more difficult for the ones that are all wanting to go that one way, and they all put the thinking caps on and they put the thinking caps on and then they'll be more down to earth and come up with the right plan.
I'm going to let Paul speak and I'm going to get you to answer that. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
I see on here that they have the different groups wanting a person there and they want maybe up to 3 others, 1 or 3 others. I feel this should be one from each ward, just so that it incurs the whole municipality, not just up here at the north end, that it covers all. You see what I mean? Like a Wanash rep, a Blythe rep, and a Wingham rep.
I just want to ask one question before we let, thank you very much to do that before we let you answer, Dwayne. Then if there's 3 there and I show up, that's the account, or that's.
No, I think so. I think what Councillor Heffer is referring to so the proposed committee structure would be that council, and again, I think it's important to emphasize that similar to the House and Dam in terms of we would go through an advertising process and we would invite applications to become a member of the museum. Up to the proposal is 3 members of the public. Council may decide to put 1 member, 2 members, or 3 members. In terms of those appointments, in terms of the public committee, in terms of the public representative appointments, those would be at council's, that would be council's decision. So if council receives the application and if council wants to look at 1 from each ward, the terms of reference do have criteria, selection criteria in there. At this point, I believe it just says that they have to be an eligible elector of the municipality. But if council wishes, we could amend that selection criteria to indicate, we can amend the terms of reference to state that it'll be 3 members of the public and it'll be a representative from each of the wards. If that's a revision that council would like us to make to the revision to the terms of reference, we can do that. And we'll bring back the final version for council's consideration at the next council meeting. So if that's the direction of council, we can certainly make that change.
Just before there, I'm just going to reflect back on what Anita said. This is a museum and we're just thinking about moving things around and now we're paying 3 councillors to be on.
No.
It doesn't have to be a
3.
counselor.
3 members of the public.
Sorry, I thought we were talking councillor. Okay, Paul was talking 3 members of council.
No.
Oh, I thought you meant
I'm
3
sorry,
members of council.
I said, no, I meant the last part of their request there.
Okay, sorry, my mistake. Okay. That's all straightened up. There's only 1 now. Okay, did I read the motion yet? It's been so long I forgot. Did I? Okay, and I believe I have a mover and seconder. Okay, any further questions or comments? All in favor? Carries. Okay, 7.4, so 7.4.1 is the Westcast. I'm going to read the motion. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receive the report from the Director of Public Works dated May 6, 2019 regarding engineering services at the Westcast Community Center for information. And further, the council approve the engineering and investigative services of Garland Canada Inc. to an upset limit of $26,800 plus applicable taxes. And further, that they approve the transfer an upset limit of 17,000 from the designated reserve for this project to complete the engineering and investigative work. Do I have a mover? Anita, seconder by Paul. Questions and comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. In favor? Carries. Seven point 4.2, the Blythe Fire Hall. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby received a report from the Director of the Public Works dated May 6, 2019, regarding the outcome of the site servicing tender for the Blythe Fire Hall and Public Works Facility for information. And further that the preliminary site work contract number 18294A in the amount of $352,800 plus applicable taxes be awarded to Curtis Smith Excavating, Inc. And further that the council deem the awarding of this contract to be time-sensitive matter and approve an extension to section 19.1 of the procedural bylaw to allow bylaw 45-2019 to be passed at the May 6, 2019 council meeting. Do I have a mover? Rick, and seconded by Kevin. Questions and comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. Oh, sorry, Kevin, Chris, did you want to say anything?
It was just such a start of a big deal. I just thought there'd be more thoughts. But I guess it's a no-brainer, go for Curtis Smith and get the process going. Yeah.
Yes, it's been a rough, bumpy ride to get it this far, and we're under the gun, and we pretty well know that we're going to be riding behind the sleigh on this one by the time we get to the end of it. So that's we need to put this into a rush.
Yeah, and that staff has been working. I just want the public to know that there's been a lot of background work. Staff has been working hard on this to set up the different stages, and it's a good one.
Yeah. And actually, we did run into a hiccup with the land and that, and if you wanted to speak to that, Sean, for public purposes, let us know what headaches you've had already.
Certainly, Reeve, thank you. Really, the only, the big issue that council might notice is the price at, the low price at $352,800 plus taxes is a fair bit less than what we were originally anticipating. And that's, a fair bit more, I apologize. And that's primarily because once we got into geotech, it was determined that there's a lot of fill in that location. There's areas as you work your way to the back of the property where there's greater than 2 meters of fill material that need to be removed. So that amounted to over $72,000 worth of additional charges in and of itself, just to deal with that additional or unanticipated fill quantity.
Also, Sean, you might want to point out to them that the extra fill, where it's going and how it's helping clubs over in Blythe. You said the fill was going to be moved over into the.
We're looking at a couple of options now. They're trying to actually determine methods to maintain as much of the fill on site by just under filling it and packing it. And then some of it we're going to use in various locations throughout the township. We had looked at possibly trying to improve some sloping over at the Blythe campground. We'll see if that, if we do have a surplus, we'll be looking at doing some work there, as well as using it for fill in other locations.
Yeah. So it's well noting that our staff thinks everything out very well and keeps the tax dollars in mind, and they are trying to use all the possible means they can to save us money, and they just did again. Any other questions or comments? I have a motion on the floor. I'm going to call the motion. All in favor? Carries. It was unanimous. Okay, we're going to go down into building department now. 7.6.1 is the,
This is one of the record. Kirk, unfortunately, is unable to be here this evening, so staff recommendation is to defer this to the next meeting at council.
I'll move.
Trevor and Paul, all in favor? Carries. Okay. Correspondence. In the correspondence, we have 8.1 to 8.4. Is there anything anybody would like to pick out for conversation? Go ahead, Trevor.
I think,
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
I think, well, there's a couple of requests here.
Yeah.
But, I think the one that, in my mind is critical, at least for a response, is 8.3. I think we need to clarify a couple of things about why things are what they are within the municipality and how the budget was determined. I know this particular ratepayer is trying to compare us to another municipality, which, in all honesty, that is what we get compared to most readily. Donna has mentioned a couple of things, a couple of reasons why our taxes are what they are, and that's low taxable assessment, and that's one of the many impacts that have caused a hindrance in the municipality of North Huron for quite a number of years, not just now. The one thing that I will say is that, the savings that we have tried to do over the past 5 years, all those savings have done is allowed us to do other work in the municipality that have been sadly missed because of the abundance of services that we have. So a prime example is the recycling was one of them. Well, that's just when it helped us move to more infrastructure projects. Like, to say these costs or savings are supposed to be going to the bottom line tax base, in all honesty, I don't think is fair. I do, however, will say personally, I have been a very big proponent about when the policing costs hopefully realize the savings on those costs when the contract is over. Those savings, at least a majority of those savings, should be commenced to infrastructure projects. Now, some of those costs should be related to put that back to the tax base to alleviate taxation in the ward and in the municipality. But in saying that, we're guessing at this point. Nobody knows what those numbers are going to be. Nobody knows what our costs are going to be in 3 years. I just think we need to have a conversation of council needs to be determined about what the priorities are in the next 3 years of this council, 4 years. And that needs to be resonated in a letter back to this ratepayer, and even maybe an open letter to the community that says, here's what we're planning on doing. We made a very big stride tonight with the discussion of Hutton Heights. These are the things that we're hoping to accomplish, and these are the things that's going to cost us in order to do that. Taxation is a problem. We get it, but there's solutions that we're trying to deal with. And I'm sorry I can't help you specifically, but we're trying to look at the bigger picture, and ultimately, I'm pleasantly surprised with a 4.5% overall. If you looked at that, based on the fact that we had some significant one-time costs in this budget that we had to inherit because of the one-time policing costs. So, I think there's hindrances, but I think we need to communicate what we are striving to accomplish over the next 4 years, and therefore be able to support those accomplishments with with something that's substantial that they can understand that where their tax-based money is going. Because it sounds to me that sometimes that the conversation is being lost in for whatever reason. And I'm not saying he's informed or not informed. I'm just saying we need to tell a different story. And what that story needs, it needs to be documented to this taxpayer. And I think, in all fairness, if they've taken the effort and the responsibility to send us something, happy or not happy, it is our responsibility as leaders in the municipality to send something back and report something to them.
Chris?
Yeah, we are obliged to respond to correspondence that comes in. And I think we should, just what Deputy Reeves said, we need to know ahead of time how we're going to respond to such letters, and have something prepared for for the events, and be prepared and be proud of our accomplishments and where the money is going, and deal with it.
Anybody else? Well, I'm going to say something here.
Oh, okay. Are we just dealing with this one at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
So, as you read, I am very proud of the budget we brought in. I am very proud of my staff and the job they do. I am very proud that we're putting a works department and fire department in Blythe, almost saving money, but we're putting 2 department buildings in, not 1. When we first came on this council, the staff was not even given direction to look for land. I am very proud of tonight because we're creating a revenue stream. And we looked at this over 20 years, and I, for one, will not be here to see it through fruition, and a few of you councilors will be joining me, but we started something for the future, and it's called a new revenue stream. And we will continue with it. So it is a hard slug. We only have 4,500 people or 4,800 people, but I am very proud to sit on this council with you folks and the work we've done in less than 6 months. And that's the message I'm putting out. And we're not going to stop. We're a good team, both on this council and in this staff. And as I said during the Hutton Heights, we've got a few more things we're going to bring forward that's going to help us. We are a council that is moving forward, and we will not condemn, and we will not talk about or blame anybody before us, because we have 4 years to sit here. We all know the struggle that we inherited, as did the councils before us, including a council I sat on before. We tried our best, but I want him to know I am very proud of my council and staff. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. Did you want Chris?
I'm a little confused. We've got all this correspondence.
I'm going back to the first one. I missed up there. Yeah. Yeah.
So can I respond to another correspondence?
Yes, you can, my friend.
Okay.
Oh, so just a second. I was going to start back at the top. I messed up there. Yeah. I'm going to start back at 8.1,
Yeah.
Maitland Valley, probably where you're going.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, we need a motion because Chris, you wanted, or it was Trevor wanted correspondence back to this person. And
The master
who wants to
letters.
put the motion forward, and what would you like to say? I've already said what I'd like to say, but it's a council decision.
I just would like staff to have prepared for council to review a response to this letter advising about what solutions that we have done or what has been done in the budgets in the past and in the future, what we've talked about at our budget meetings about how we're going to deal with these particular instances. And then we as council need to help that with, if we have had any discussions or any thoughts in the meantime, those conversations need to be sent to Donna so that we have an understanding of what the direction of us as individuals are being, but also the conversations that councils had during those budget deliberations. So it's just, I just want to make sure that council is involved in documenting this response. This should not be a response of strictly staff. because it was vetted to council.
Yeah.
Council has to take ownership, not staff. So that's why I'm saying Donna and the staff have been involved in the conversations about budgets and what's going on. So document that and bring it back to a response to a letter about how we respond to it.
So you want a motion of, can the CEO put together a letter that we can return to this person?
Yep.
With proper information?
Yep.
Good enough, guys?
And be ready to acknowledge other such letters, other common
Yep.
letters.
Add that to it.
Yeah, have it ready.
All in favor?
I need a
Oh,
second.
sorry.
I'll second.
Chris is going to second it. Thank you very much. Questions or comments? All in favor? Carries. Okay, so let's go back up to 8.1, Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, Provincial Government Proposal Amendments. On this one, I actually had, we have a motion here. I'm going to read the motion and we'll have the conversation. So for let me move over here. 8.1, it is that the Council Township of North Huron hereby direct a review of the 50-50 cost sharing with the Water and Erosion Control Infrastructure Agreement with the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority. Do I have a mover? Kevin, do I have a seconder? Sorry, Chris. Do I have a seconder, Rick? Comments or questions? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the recovery of capital costs and operating expenses from municipalities. I'm really glad that we hopefully that we review it. Like, they got cut back 50, or they got cut back, and I don't know where we're gonna fit into all this. And are we expected to come up with extra dollars to satisfy their needs? I'm not sure. So I just need to learn more about this.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Anita.
I'm sitting on the Maitland Valley board there, and it is a very big concern. They were cut with 50%. The services are cut very much. They are not sure how they are going to do their funding. They're looking at a cost recovery funding. Their water source protection is really under review, so it's all a little bit of in the air still. They are in talks with the Minister from Environment and from, what's his name? It is all not completely sure yet, but it's going to be a different way of working with Maitland Valley, and there might be a review necessary, but I don't know when would be the proper time, or if that's now.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Kevin.
Is the situation that they're coming under with the cuts from funding from the provincial government, would that dissolve any agreement they would have for funding? Like 50% would have been at whatever funding they had during that time that agreement was made. Would that dissolve that agreement, and then they would have to look for?
I think you've got a very good point there, and it's one that we need to bring up with the review. Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty here, and we are responsible to the ratepayers of North Huron and how we spend their taxes, and we got to be careful that we're not fixing a bridge in Godrich under the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, and this is what we have to review because of their funding cut. It's got us all a little worried.
It is not that we are going to fund the bridge in Godrich.
But you know what I meant. It was outside of the North Huron. I'm worried about spending money outside of the North Huron.
Yeah.
If I'm going to spend money with them, it'll be to fix up that place over in East Wawanosh that we used to take the children to conservation.
area.
Yeah. Paul, you had something?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah. So I kind of brought this forward. I have two concerns. One is the way I read that letter, we just said 50-50, but we don't know what the finances are at the other end. So they could come to us and say, here's a project for $100,000 and you guys have to pay 50%. So we need to be able to say yes or no, just like anything else we're doing in this council. Here's the issues and we need to move forward with it. That's one of my concerns. The other, if you decide to go through with this, I'll talk about the other concern at that time. Any other questions or comments? And this is just to review.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. All in favor? Passes.
May I say something else?
Yes.
It might be wise when we do the review to speak with the directors from the Pleasant Valley.
We'll want them as
Phil
part of,
Beasley.
yes, and you can let Phil know we'd like them at that meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he can
Oh, I
explain
can-
it way better than I can.
I overstepped my bounds there, but I'm pretty sure everybody's gonna be fine with it. Okay, the next one is the John Lowe, and we have here that the Council Township of North Huron hereby support the read in proclaiming May 6th to 12th, 2019 as Nursing Week.
Move.
Trevor, Kevin, comments or questions? Seeing none, I call the motion. Pass.
My wife thanks you.
And I'm gonna go down to 8.4 as soon as it loads. Huron County Soil and Crop Improvement Association. Is anybody going to that? We got this in. It's for, I think, this Saturday over. Yeah, I'll maybe let Dwayne speak to it a bit if you want, Dwayne, and, or, go ahead.
So this is a request that we received from the Huron County Soil and Crop Association. They're proposing or organizing an event for Saturday, June the 15th, to showcase their drainage project at Huron View Farm, south of Clinton. There'll be a live demonstration and tours of the site that day. And they've attached, there's different levels of sponsorship that are available. And I won't go into any great detail, but they are outlined there on a poster. So it's anywhere from, you can provide sponsorship or the partnership or sponsorship opportunities. Bronze level is $500, silver is $1,000, and gold is $2,500. And it does include tickets to attend the event itself. So question is in terms of, does council wish to provide sponsorship? Regardless of whether council provides sponsorship, all of council is invited to attend.
So I'm gonna open it up to the floor. Questions or comments? Seeing none. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, it'd be nice to participate. I think I would go if I'm not, if we're not still in the fields. But I would make an effort to attend.
Okay. We appreciate that on behalf of our council. I can't commit to it right now. I've got a couple other things on the go. Anyone else have that day off? Well, not so much to do that day would be a better way to put it. Okay. Chris, we appreciate you doing that for us. And I don't think we need a motion for that. Okay. We're gonna go to council reports now. We're gonna go to the Reeves report. This last couple of weeks, I was down in Ottawa for the opening up of the Pitch and King play. It was, I'm sure for everybody from Blythe Theater that was involved in it, was nerve-wracking, wondering how it would go over, how it would be met. I was too, as the reef standing there. And I remember went in and sat at my seat. I was there actually 45 minutes early and drank a lot of coffee. It did open up. I went to my seat 10 minutes ahead of time and looked around, and it was a little bit empty. And within 10 minutes, that place was packed. I do not believe there was a spare seat in the place. And they did us proud. That's my second time for seeing it. And it was just an amazing, They pulled it off, and we were so well respected because of the Blythe Theater and that group. And I know Kevin, he went to the last one, and he'll speak to that, I'm sure, later. I went to the OSUM, the Ontario Small Urban Municipalities. Again, Kevin and myself and Dwayne were there for 3 days. Met a lot of people, got a lot of business cards, already have emails from people that would like to come and talk to our council. Actually got to know some of the mayors from Huron County a little better too. It was a very delightful time, a very informative time, and I'm glad I did take the time to go. I'm always a little leery at going those things because every one of you behind the scenes hear me say that I don't rub elbows with higher ups in the government. If I can't do something, I don't want to go. So I feel it was very informative, and I do believe it was worth the tax dollars that put us there. Lisa Thompson and the Ford government have given us $532,000, $500,000. I don't know how many communities got it. It is a one-shot deal. It was right out of the blue. It was an email while I was sitting in somebody's driveway waiting for them to come home so I could do my day job. I almost deleted it because it looked phony, and it was only to me. And I thought, better send this to Dawn and just get her to look at it. I was thinking maybe if I click on it, it's going to fry my computer. We all know. We got $532,000, and it's in our bank account already, I believe. I think this council should send a personal note to Lisa Thompson thanking her very much. I think we should also send one to Mr. Ford thanking him very much, and maybe mentioning that if he's got any more floating around, we're available. I don't think I need a motion of council for that, do I, Dwayne? We can just, your call.
If you want to send a letter of thanks, you should have a motion.
I will call for a motion to send a letter to both Lisa and Mr. Ford, Chris and Paul. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. I've been meeting with the county staff, and I appreciate their help and support with the Huron Heights. They're going to be very valuable to us. Our staff has been phenomenal working with me, even though I asked them to make last-minute changes and carry on. So I want to thank them. This truly is going to, and I want to thank Mrs. Townsend who came back in. She was part of all this and willing to meet with me on a short notice. And I will stay with this on behalf of council, and I will keep reporting back to you on what's going on, and I will keep pushing it forward. I have some plans. We will act on nothing until this council okays it. But know if you hear something, it's because I am working on it and my staff is working on it, okay? I went to the Futures program, and it's unique because I just want to mention this because everywhere I go, every meeting I've been to, whether it's the association or who it is, the same conversation comes up. There's no houses, there's no houses, there's no houses. So I hope we're going to be a big part of changing that for Huron County. And with what's going on at Douglas Point, the jobs are there. And I sit on the Futures program, and they too, the manufacturers that sit there say, the jobs are here, we just don't have anywhere to keep the people, and they're not going to drive back and forth from Kitchener. Can you do something for us? So I'm quite happy with that. With that, that's it for the Rees report. The next is 9.2, council member reports, verbal or written. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Reed. Had an opportunity prior to the Ontario Small Urban Municipalities Conference to attend an invite from Ben Lobb and his office to a reception after the Pigeon King play, which was packed again, and seeing it for the second time on a different stage gave it a different perspective for me, and it was quite enlightening to see again. The reception was held privately at a evening establishment just across the street. It was easy to find that night because of all the black SUVs that just seemed to be parking in every which way, just with the interior lights on dim and no other markings, and the added security at the door. It was an invite to any ministers that would at question period that morning they wanted to attend, that they were there was a ticket there for them. There was only 3 ministers that returned back to the reception afterwards. I was hoping for a few bit more, and I got within 2 security personnel from the defense minister, but that was as close as I could get to him. So I didn't have any conversation with them. But the representative from Ben Lobb's office did a great opening at the reception about North Huron, about the context of the plays that they put on, and what a special place this is, because the theater is a place where Canadian plays are made. This is where they're produced or written, and the thoughts are coming up, and this is where they're first premiered. And it really does speak to the flavor of the land and to the people of this area. I just hearing different pieces of picking up different people's conversations at that invitation event was they were quite thrilled about the story, and that just it just kept exasperating more questions about the area and who lived here, what the demographics is. Dairy farming here, people that have no idea where we are. So anytime that you can present yourself in that kind of a light was a great opportunity, and it wasn't wasted. A lot of people heard a great story and had a chance to meet the cast afterwards. As far as the attending the Ontario Small Urban Municipality Convention, the biggest takeaway that I found from the information there was the changes that is going on within our recycling and refuge community as a backlash from I guess some of you have heard in the media, some of the third world countries are telling us to take back our garbage. I didn't realize how many third world, and China is a huge buyer of our recycling products, plastics and metals. They're cutting back. They're not taking our stuff anymore. So that's dropping the prices that we can get for our recycling. So the recycling companies and themselves are having to find new ways of dealing with that. And they're proposing a joint venture at putting more onus on the manufacturers of they're manufacturing the plastics to cover the cost for small municipalities to run the landfills they have and the recycling programs to take the product that at one time was a resource that we could, people would pay to take it from us, but now we can't. So they're having to find new ways. So just the ideas that they were passing around, and there were some great new ideas of how to deal with that was my greatest takeaway from that conference. There were other equally as impelling or compelling arguments on all the other topics that were covered there, but that's the one that I took the greatest interest in. So it was a good one to attend with other municipalities of our size, and really we were pretty much 50-50 with the bigger people. It was under 300,000 in your municipality to be considered small, but they were small ones, like Meaford and South Huron was there. I mean, sure everyone was there, but there was 250 delegates there. It was one of the biggest conventions they've had. So I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Kevin. Anyone else? Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, doing a report on Alice Monroe on Friday, the 24th. They're having authors, readers coming up to the local schools here, the Wingham School, Effie Medill morning and afternoon classes. And then they're also going to be at Howick for, I think, a morning one. And then they're going to go to Clinton. A couple of readers will be down there. That's the Friday. The Saturday is going to be in Wingham. And on Sunday, they're going to be down in Bayfield. So I'll be involved with Wingham one, and they're going to have a bus tour in the morning. When people first come here, or just different places where she lived and what she went to. And then they're around town. They're having an audio tour, walking tour. People are just going to be staying in different places where she wrote on the book, in her books, different places around here. And at that time, they're going to be having some readers upstairs here and over at the library all at the same time. Then at dinner time, they're going to the Legion with people coming back and forth as the day goes on. They're going to have Legion. I think they can hold 120. They're going to be there, and they're going to have the short story winner read there. And then on the afternoon, Saturday afternoon, they're having, again, upstairs here and at the local library here till 5 sometime, 5:30. And then it'll be making their way down to Bayfield after that. So it's going to be a busy time. They're hoping they're going to have lots of sales with it, and that's with that. That's on the 25th here in Wingham. I had our last meeting with Wingham Theatre and Heritage Theatre. I just want to thank all of you for coming out to the reveal party that they had. Is very much appreciated by the committee, and with the money that they had left over yet, and they took in another $4,000 just after that day. Mr. Ivanhoven was talking to some of the people. They gave another $4,000. So what they have planned on doing is going to be backstage curtain, a back wall curtain, I guess I should call it. He wanted, Ivanhoven's uncomfortable with the urinals there. He wants to put dividers in. So that's good. And the south stairwell, we want to finish that off to be the same as, the north stairwell to be the same as the south stairwell, and also plating the floor and sanding the floor, of the stage and upstairs there too. Just have it nice and new looking like our the south stairway is. And so we're planning doing that next January, February, when things slow down. They can't do it in between different functions that are going on. And they plan having $81 left over if everything goes well. We may have one more meeting then. But I think at that time, Mr. Ivanhoven and the group had finished what they proposed to do, was to get the theater back in good working order. And I think Sean's has some things going on up above with the insulation, that type of stuff. So it was good. And I just want to say this a bit separate, but on Saturday night they had an Elvis thing here, and there's a lot of comments about how well the theater looks. So it is getting used. And Almost Famous had it for 3 nights the past week too, and it was pretty well sold out the 2 or by donation there for 2 of the nights. The one night I went, it was a little bit lighter, but it's being used. Let's put it that way. So that's good.
Well, I can say my mom sure enjoyed Elvis, and she sure enjoyed the theater, and she commented many times about the changes in the theater since she was in there last. So yes, yeah,
A lot of
she
people
was
did.
packed.
They noticed it, yeah.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, let's move on to notice of motion. I have a notice of motion that the Council Township of North Huron hereby direct the staff to organize a meeting between North Huron County and the municipality of Morris Turnberry regarding the cost to operate and maintain the Richard Levan Airport. Could I have a mover? Oh, sorry. Dwayne wanted to talk to it. I heard something in my ear.
No, just a procedural as a clarification. It's a notice of motion. The motion itself will be discussed at the next council meeting.
Oh, okay. And so I still have to get the mo. I didn't think so, but anyway,
No.
It was set up for me to ask. I'm sorry, Anita. You can't do it this
I was
time.
waving.
So it will be at the next, okay, and that's to do with Godrich have been talking to me. Bylaws. Dwayne, bylaws. Dwayne, I'm gonna let you take over the bylaws. Dwayne is going to speak to the bylaws.
So bylaw 40 of 2019 is a bylaw to appoint the deputy reeve as an alternate to county council. So bylaw number 40 of 2019 being a bylaw to appoint the deputy reeve as an alternate to the reeve for Huron County Council be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reeve and clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Do I have a mover? Rick, seconder, Paul, questions or concerns? All in favor? Carries.
Bylaw 41 is a bylaw to amend the procedure bylaw and attach position descriptions for the reeve and deputy reeve. Bylaw 41, 2019 being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 116 of 2017 being a bylaw to govern the calling, place, and proceedings of the council and committees of the Township of North Huron, and to provide public notice of meetings be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reeve and clerk, and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Do I have a mover? Anita? Seconder. Trevor? Questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries.
Bylaw 42 of 2019 is a bylaw to establish fees and charges for the township of North Huron. So read as follows. Bylaw 42, 2019, being a bylaw to establish fees and charges for the township of North Huron, be read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reading clerk and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Cool. Trevor moves, seconder is Chris. Comments or questions? Seeing none, I call the motion. In favor? Passes.
Bylaw 43, 2019 is a bylaw to authorize an agreement with the Knights of Columbus. So bylaw 43, 2019, being a bylaw to authorize an agreement with the Knights of Columbus to operate the Columbus Center at the North Huron West Community Complex for a 5-year term, July 1, 2019 to June 30th, 2024. Be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reading clerk and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Do I have a mover? Chris Palmer, seconder. Trevor Sipes. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes.
Bylaw 44 is a bylaw for levying and collecting rates. So bylaw 44, 2019, being a bylaw for the purpose of levying and collecting rates for various purposes and provide for the payment of taxes and to provide for penalty and interest, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reading clerk and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Do I have a mover? Trevor? Seconder, Paul. Questions or comments? Seeing none, call the vote. All in favor? Passes.
Bylaw 45 is a bylaw to authorize a site servicing tender agreement for the Blythe Fire Hall and Public Works Facility. So the resolution reads as follows. Bylaw number 45, 2019, being a bylaw to authorize a site servicing tender agreement for the Blythe Fire Hall and Public Works Facility, be introduced, read a first, second, third, and final time, signed by the reading clerk and be engrossed in the bylaw book.
Do I have a mover? Rick McBurney, seconder. Chris Palmer. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carries. And that's it for the bylaws for tonight. So now we go to announcements. Special council meeting will be held Friday, May 10th, 2019 at 9 a.m. in the North Huron Council. The next one is the next regular council meeting will be held Tuesday, May 21st, 2019 at 6 p.m. in the North Huron Council chambers. The next police board meeting will be held Tuesday, May 14th at 7 p.m. in the North Huron Council chambers. Other business, anyone? Seeing none, we're going into closed camera now. Do I have a mover to go into closed camera? Trevor and Kevin, all in favor? Passes. We're gonna take a 5-minute break.